Chapter 5376. Woman. Lord Guangguang tugged on Arbor's clothes and shook it forcefully. Aren't you going to control her? My hair is about to stand on end because of her anger. After saying that, the little monk climbed to his side and sat on the bed obediently. He raised his hand and touched Lord Guangguang's hairless head. You don't have hair. Arbor couldn't hold back the amusement in his heart, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. The little monkey nodded and hurriedly added, I think you won't be able to grow hair in this lifetime, so don't have extravagant hopes. The little monk patted Lord Guangguang's head comfortingly. Don't be afraid, there are benefits to not having hair. You don't have to wash your hair if you don't have hair, just wipe it with a rag at any time. Kai Chi, who was passing tea to Arbor, couldn't help but burst into laughter when she heard that. These three little radishes couldn't help but bicker when they were together. It was really too fun to watch. The little monkey snorted and proudly lifted his little chin, asking in all seriousness, Hang, what do you call this little sister? Lord Guangguang glanced at Arbor and silently swallowed the word, woman. He said with an unclear and unwilling expression, Call me aunt. The little monkey's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, See, you call my little sister aunt, what does this mean? Doesn't this mean that in terms of seniority, I am your little aunt? Lord Guangguang almost fainted from his fallacious reasoning. He glared at the little monkey and shouted angrily, You little brat, you actually dared to take advantage of Lord Guangguang. This fellow was so angry that his mouth couldn't even move properly. He stuttered for a long time before he finished his sentence. The little monkey's eyes curved as he glanced at him. So what if I took advantage of you? Who asked you to be so stupid? Besides, don't my words make sense? It's always like this. You call my little sister aunt, then aren't you my little nephew? Guangguang, now you know what you should call me, right? Guangguang was so angry that he didn't want to bother with her, so he simply turned his face to look at his little master. With one look, he discovered that his little master was awake. Two big, black eyes were staring at him at this moment. Her small, diamond-shaped mouth was slightly tilted up, and her porcelain-white face was glowing. She looked extremely beautiful. The glutinous rice balls were pink and fluffy. This was too much fun. Lord Guangguang called out, Little dumpling, and Arbor froze for a moment. His memory seemed to have been taken back to the heavenly snow region. Thinking back to that time, a certain scammer had also called her Little Dumpling. She then looked at her son, who was a little thing with a round head. It was indeed quite suitable to call him Little Dumpling. So she nodded and said, All right, I'll call him Little Dumpling from now on. Lord Guangguang seemed very happy. Who would have thought that the name he had given to his master would be adopted by Sir Jojo? Thinking about it this way, he felt that he was quite talented. Master Guangguang glanced at Arbor with a smile. Auntie, can I play with little master for a while? Arbor looked over and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She saw that her son, who had a pair of big, black grape-like eyes just now, had long fallen asleep. This little fellow's eyes were closed, and he was sleeping there quietly. The few of them looked at each other, not knowing when this fellow had fallen asleep. But the child had just been born, and her mother had reminded her before that the child would definitely be more sleepy in the early stages, so she didn't have to be nervous and so on. Chapter 5377. She reached out to poke the child's soft forehead and shook her head at Guangguang. Look, Xiaoduanzi is asleep now. Let him sleep for a while. In the past 2 days, he had been advancing and going through tribulations. He was still so young. It was quite torturous. Since Xiaoduanzi was asleep now, let him have a good sleep. The little guy could probably consolidate his realm in his sleep. Xiao Mu felt that she was indulging in the wildest of fantasies, so she hastily shook her head and cast aside this unrealistic thought. Now that she had a child, she could understand how her mother felt when she had her. She didn't want her child to be rich or talented. She only wanted her child to be safe and sound. Guangguang didn't insist on disturbing Xiaoduanzi. She nodded and said sensibly, All right then. Let the little master have a good rest. Only with a good rest can he grow up quickly. In the future, Master Guangguang will definitely accompany the little master to gain experience. Arbor's lips curved slightly. She was in a good mood. In the future, she would also bring the child out to gain experience. Whether it was the Phoenix Forest in the southernmost part, the ice sky snow region in the northernmost part, or the vast and boundless sea of forgetfulness. The family of three would have fun wherever they went. Ever since Qingzhou was taken down by Tianyun, the situation in the three states became more and more tense. The great emperor gathered the crown prince and his men and held several meetings to make arrangements. However, after the fall of Qingzhou, several small countries around it were in a precarious situation. They frequently sent distress signals to Shenzhou. The crown prince was so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. He didn't even come back for lunch. Occasionally, he would come back, but every time he came and went in a hurry. Arbor felt sorry for him. Fortunately, she heard that the second young master of the Xie family had also returned to the capital. With this person helping the crown prince, it could reduce his burden. Recently, the great emperor looked at the crown prince with a gaze that said, "I'm old. It's time to hand over this burden to you." She felt that in the near future, this unreliable father was very likely to give up his responsibilities to the crown prince. Arbor gently put down the cup in her hand and patted her son who was still sleeping soundly under the blanket. Suddenly he heard footsteps outside the door. Eunuch Chen jogged in and hurriedly bowed. Crown Princess, Princess Consort entered the palace to pay respects to Her Majesty the Empress. She then made a detour to the Eastern Palace, saying that she wanted to personally congratulate the Crown Princess. The little Crown Princess glanced at the door indifferently. She could vaguely see a few figures moving around. Since she was entering the palace to pay respects to the Empress, it meant that this Princess Consort had received her mother's permission to enter the palace today. Since that was the case, Jojo naturally could not disregard his mother. She nodded and said indifferently, "Please come in." Princess Consort followed Eunuch Chen in with a cautious expression. The moment she entered, she bowed towards the young Crown Princess. "Greetings to the Crown Princess." His attitude was respectful, and he did not dare to slight her in the slightest. The little stoic nodded and had someone come forward to help her up. Her gaze landed on Su Shitao behind her, and she raised her brows in surprise. Although she didn't have a gossipy heart, she had heard a lot of gossip from Caichi and the others. She was rather familiar with the gossipy family affairs of the Prince Zheng's estate. She had always heard that Princess Consort did not get along with this Miss Su Shitao. Wasn't it a bit abnormal for her to bring her into the palace today? Chapter 5378. Arbor couldn't help but take a few more glances at Su Shitao. Princess Tao, who was usually very aggressive, was actually very obedient today. Not only did she come forward with Princess Consort and respectfully bow to the young crown princess, but she even raised her head and smiled at Arbor with a gentle and well-mannered expression. Arbor's hand trembled and she lost her grip on the teacup. The hot tea spilled out just like that. The tea stained Su Shitao's skirt. If it were any other time, this Princess Tao would have jumped up in anger and scolded her while pointing at her. It was even very likely that she would have punched her directly. However, it was very strange today. Not only did this Princess Tao not blame her, but she even asked for her forgiveness in fear and trepidation. She kept saying that it was because of her clumsy legs that she didn't dodge in time, which led to such a disaster. Xiao Mu was simply stupefied, and she hastily sized up Su Shitao. She pointed at her very seriously and turned to ask Princess Consort what's wrong with her? She had changed her mind so quickly that she was at a loss for what to do. Could it be that Prince Zheng had taught this Princess Tao a lesson in private? That was probably not very likely. From what she saw, Prince Zheng doted on his only sister very much. He probably wouldn't lay a finger on her. Princess Consort Zheng's gaze was also somewhat secretive. She followed the young crown princess's gaze and sized up Su Shitao. Princess Consort Zheng felt that this younger sister of hers seemed to have taken the wrong medicine today. Her tone was unbelievably gentle. However, she had never interacted with this person, so she couldn't be bothered to care about what tricks this younger sister of hers was up to. If Prince Zheng hadn't forced her to bring Su Shitao into the palace to broaden her horizons, she definitely wouldn't have brought such an uncertain factor into the palace to pay her respects. At this thought, Princess Consort turned to the young crown princess and said with a smile, "Crown princess, congratulations. I heard that the emperor's little grandson encountered the heavenly fire lightning tribulation when he was born. He must have outstanding talent, surpassing ordinary people." "That's right, crown princess. Congratulations," Su Shitao also said. He quickly took 2 steps forward and approached the bed. She couldn't help but lift the thin and soft brocade blanket that covered the little dumpling. Not only is the young prince different from ordinary people, but he is also different from ordinary people. In my opinion, the crown princess is also very different from ordinary people, Su Shitao said with a smile. Otherwise, how could the crown princess be able to get up and walk normally a few days after the child was born? Princess Consort Zheng's eyes flickered slightly, but she did not stop Su Shitao from continuing. "I've heard people say that the little prince is quite an anomaly. In 1 day he would be able to open his eyes, in 2 days he would be able to call for his mother, and in 3 days he would be able to run. Crown princess, is it true?" "Tao, don't talk nonsense." Princess Consort Zheng symbolically reprimanded Su Shitao, allowing Su Shitao to blabber on endlessly. The young crown princess pressed down on Su Shitao's action of lifting the blanket, and her expression instantly darkened. Now that he was close, a pungent fragrance from Su Shitao's body assailed his nostrils, causing Arbor to frown uncontrollably. Who said that this Su Shitao's personality changed? It didn't change at all. It was just that his original threatening gestures had been disguised as today's acrimony. Su Shitao wasn't alarmed when the young crown princess pressed down on his hand. He merely glanced indifferently at the little stoic. Looking at her tense little face, he smiled faintly and leaned closer. Chapter 5379. Crown Princess, did you know? I'm not spouting nonsense. Right now, the entire capital is secretly spreading the rumor that the young imperial grandson is a demon fetus. Think about it, a baby that can open his eyes in 1 day, call out for his mother in 2 days, and run on the ground in 3 days. If he's not a demon fetus, then what is he? You're spouting nonsense. Kai Chi was so anxious that her eyes were red. She couldn't help but berate angrily, "How can our young imperial grandson be so resourceful? It's not what you're saying at all." The young imperial grandson couldn't be any more normal. For the past few days, he had been sleeping like an ordinary child. He had been sleeping the entire time. When he opened his eyes, he would grumble about eating and drinking. After eating, he would sleep. It was just that simple. Why hadn't she heard the rumor that there was a demon fetus spreading around the capital? It must be this Su Shitao who used these words to anger their crown princess. Kai Chi was both anxious and furious. She hurriedly turned to the young crown princess and said, "Crown princess, don't listen to her nonsense. This servant sees that her words are evasive and untruthful. She must be lying to you." The young crown princess nodded. She pulled back her hand and slapped the approaching Su Shitao. She sneered in a low voice, "Is this crown princess such a gullible person in your eyes?" Su Shitao cried out in alarm. She flipped over and sat on the ground. She hastily crawled a few steps back and retreated several feet away from the arbor. Su Shitao suppressed a trace of fury in her eyes. If she hadn't done her utmost to control her anger, she would have exploded long ago. She was simply too envious of this crown princess. Actually, as soon as she entered the Eastern Palace, Su Shitao's eyes were dazzled by the magnificent decorations and jealousy. Not to mention, once she entered the palace, she had to lower herself to be a concubine everywhere. Now, she even had to follow Princess Consort Zheng and pay respects to this young crown prince consort. This made her feel uncomfortable all over and extremely sullen all over. The demon fetus that she had blurted out wasn't something that she had made up without any evidence. Indeed, there was a strange rumor spreading in the imperial capital. She wasn't the one who spread it. She had only said it out of the goodness of her heart for the crown princess to hear. Who would have thought that she would be so unreasonable and give her such a heavy slap in the face? This damn Xiao Mu. Su Shitao secretly gritted her teeth and took a deep breath, trying her best to suppress her anger. Arbor glared at her and immediately became alert. There must be something fishy going on. According to what she knew about Princess Tao, she was not a patient person. There was definitely something wrong with her current appearance. Arbor reached out and took the child into his arms. With a solemn expression, he took the child's pulse and looked coldly at Su Shitao. The little crown princess said coldly, "Capture her and search her." Su Shitao's gaze contracted, and she shouted repeatedly, "What are you doing? Crown princess, you can't treat me like this without distinguishing right from wrong just because of your status." The little stoic had never been someone who liked to waste words with others. Since she ordered people to capture her, they would be captured. Why was there so much nonsense? With a look, several palace servants around them hastily rushed forward and restrained the struggling Su Shitao in a flurry of moves. Su Shitao flew into a rage and shouted in an abnormally shrill voice, "What are you doing? Crown princess, what do you want to search?" Noisy, the little crown princess complained in a low voice with a cold expression. Chapter 5380. Kai Chi immediately took out a dirty rag and stuffed it into Su Shitao's mouth. The latter widened her eyes in disbelief and glared hatefully at Kai Chi, her entire face flushed red. It was as if she was suffering an enormous grievance. Tears welled up in Su Shitao's eyes and didn't fall for a long time. At the young crown princess's command, those junior royal maids from the Eastern Palace immediately swarmed forward and pinned Su Shitao down. They didn't show any mercy to the fairer sex and lifted her clothes to search her body. They searched her from head to toe, inside and out, and placed all the bottles and jars they found in front of the young crown princess. The little stoic's small face was cold as she reached out to take one of the porcelain bottles. She pressed the bottle's opening and shook it vigorously. "Black centipede." She expressionlessly spat out these 3 words. She then took another porcelain bottle and shook it, coldly saying, "Poisonous scorpion." 7 pollen. Su Shitao's pupils contracted and dilated as he watched this expressionless young crown princess identify the items inside the bottles one by one. A bad premonition flitted through his heart. "You prepared more than a dozen types of poisonous insects, poisonous substances, and poisonous powders and carried them all on you in order to wait for an opportunity to use these things to harm my son?" The little stoic's lips tugged into an icy curve. Kai Chi couldn't help but shudder slightly when she saw this. When the crown princess said this, her eyes coldly glared at Su Shitao. The iciness and callousness in the depths of her eyes engulfed everything, as if she could tear Su Shitao to shreds in the next instant. Su Shitao widened her eyes in horror and spat out the dirty rag in her mouth with all her might. She feigned ignorance and asked, "How can you malign me like this? What proof do you have that I brought these things to harm the young imperial grandson? Can I use them for self-defense?" "The fragrance on your body." Arbor gazed at her coldly. "There's a big problem." "There, what problem?" Arbor sent a look to Kai Chi and Kai Xiu. The two immediately understood and walked up apathetically, pressing Su Shitao onto the gold-threaded wooden table next to them. Su Shitao let out a short scream, and then his eyes widened in fear and anger. With an expression of disbelief, he stared at the open bottle in Kai Chi's hand. The powder in the bottle was poured into her mouth. The fine powder was choked by the wind. Su Shitao couldn't help but cough and spit out a small mouthful of powder. Arbor threw a pill to Kai Chi and Kai Xiu, hinting them to take it as soon as possible. Then she looked coldly at Su Shitao. Her eyes were as cold as ice in the abyss, without the slightest hint of warmth. "Su Shitao," Arbor coldly said to her, "today, even if the Daluo immortal is here, no one will be able to save your life." Only now did Princess Consort Zheng return to her senses. She hurriedly took 2 steps forward and said, Crown Princess, what's going on? Tao has always been disrespectful to the Crown Princess, so it's only right for you to punish her. But can you not implicate her family?" Su Shitao's anger was stifled in her chest. It was very unbearable to hold it in. "Sister-in-law, you actually said that about me? You didn't plead for mercy for me and find a way out for me, but you actually kicked me to death?" Princess Consort Zheng looked as if she expected better from Su Shitao and coldly glanced at her. Chapter 5381. 5. 1133-inch Tao. Don't blame me for being merciless. I've already reminded you many times. His Highness also told you not to do stupid things again, but did you listen to my advice? Princess Consort Zheng sighed and said, I followed His Highness's orders today to bring you into the palace. I didn't expect that something like this would happen. This consort is also about to be too ashamed to see people. How could you do such a muddle-headed thing, Tao? Princess Consort Zheng sighed with a long sigh. However, Arbor glanced at her coldly. Princess Consort Zheng, do you know what these dozen types of poisonous insects and powder are for? Princess Consort Zheng couldn't help but be taken aback. Then, she hurriedly shook her head in fear and trepidation. Crown Princess, don't worry. I don't know anything about these poisonous insects and powder that Tao plays with. The young Crown Princess smiled coldly at her. Go call Fairy Yellowhe over. Princess Consort, just sit here for a while. I want to find a more professional person to properly explain to Princess Consort. Princess Consort Zheng's palms were clammy with cold sweat. For some reason, she inwardly felt that it seemed like the situation was taking a sharp turn for the worse, inexplicably developing in a terrifying direction. At this time, Su Shitao, who had choked on a mouthful of poisonous powder, was glaring hatefully at Arbor, as if she could glare her to death. Fairy Yellowhe arrived very quickly. Within a few minutes, she rushed to the young Crown Princess's bedchamber with several capable assistants. When she heard that the young Crown Princess had been attacked with poisonous insects and powder, Yellowhe ran in with a cold expression, shouting along the way, Who dares to attack Jojo? It's you. Yellowhe's eyes abruptly glared at Su Shitao, who was huddled by the door, sizing her up. Yellowhe, take a look at the things on the table. Fairy Yellowhe nodded and quickly ran forward. One by one, she picked them up and carefully studied them. Her expression slowly turned grave. She looked back at Arbor hesitantly. Arbor was sitting on the edge of the bed with her son in her arms. When she saw Huang He turn his head and glance at her, she nodded at him. Huang He immediately understood. He stood beside the table and skillfully mixed the contents of the bottles and jars on the table. In less than half a cup of tea's time, Fairy Huang He had carefully mixed the poison powder of the poisonous insects into a black medicinal liquid. The medicinal liquid swayed back and forth in a transparent container. It looked like a ball of flowing ink, extremely dark. Fairy Yellow Crane held the bottle of medicinal liquid and walked step by step towards the pale-faced Princess Consort Zheng and Su Shitao. Princess Consort Zheng's voice trembled as she asked, What is this? Does Princess Consort not know? Arbor looked at Princess Consort Zheng and said coldly, This is the source of this world's mass production of corpse puppets. Commonly known as the basic mutated medicinal liquid. It's not as powerful as the mutated pill, but if you frequently take this basic mutated medicinal liquid, the transformation of the body is also extraordinary. Princess Consort Zheng stood there dumbstruck. She then shook her head repeatedly and muttered to herself in a daze, Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Was the Crown Princess joking? How could the Miss of the Prince Zheng estate carry the poisonous insects and powder used to make the basic mutated medicinal liquid with her? All of this must have been planted by the young Crown Princess, right? The Prince Zheng estate definitely could not take the blame for this. Too sleepy, I'm falling asleep. Chapter 5382. Impossible. Princess Consort Zheng's voice trembled slightly as she abruptly turned to glare at Su Shitao. The flames of rage that shot out from those eyes seemed like sharp arrows that had been poisoned, and they could annihilate Su Shitao in a matter of minutes. Su Shitao shuddered in fright from Princess Consort Zheng's reaction, and he hurriedly explained, Sister-in-law, you trust an outsider and not your own people? Princess Consort Zheng naturally didn't trust Su Shitao at all. Her husband's younger sister kept lowering her own limits almost every day. You would never know what kind of even more terrifying and outrageous things this woman could do. Sister-in-law, I really don't know what these things are. Before Su Shitao could refute, Princess Consort Zheng gave him a big slap across the face, directly slapping his face to the side. I warned His Highness before that if he doesn't restrain you, the entire Prince Jing estate will fall at your hands sooner or later. He didn't listen to me. See now, retribution has come. What kind of father raises what kind of children? Princess Consort Zheng's eyes burst with a cold light brimming with hatred and anger. With such a selfish father, you won't be any better as a daughter. Su Shitao was so angry that his entire body trembled. He covered his face with one hand and pointed at Princess Consort Zheng with the other. You actually dared to hit me. Princess Consort Zheng took several steps forward and backhanded another heavy slap, directly landing on the other side of Su Shitao's face. Su Shitao's body swayed from side to side from Princess Consort Zheng's slap, and he spun half a circle backward before falling head first onto the ground. Princess Consort Zheng, if you want to teach someone a lesson, then drag him out and teach him a lesson. Don't dirty this crown princess room. Arbor held the baby with one hand and looked at Princess Consort Zheng and Su Shitao with extremely cold eyes, her voice filled with boundless iciness. The vassal king consort of Zheng, Shi Yongyan's heart trembled, and she hastily turned around to give Qiao Mu a curtsy. She maintained her composure. Crown Prince Consort, please forgive this concubine for being impolite. Fairy Yellow Crane threw the basic mutated potion on the table and turned to look at Su Shitao. She directly questioned, you brought these things here because you were thinking about how to harm people, right? It was a pity that this person was trying to display his slight skill in front of Jojo. He was simply asking for humiliation. Don't slander me. Su Shitao bit his lips and shouted angrily, I don't know what these things are. It's just that before I left today, I met an old woman in the courtyard who was fiddling with these medicine bottles. Out of curiosity, I walked over and asked about it. Now that she thought about it, all of this must have been set up by someone else. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that she would bump into such a gloomy old woman just as she was about to leave the house? Furthermore, she would be able to learn from her that no matter which poison was used, just a little bit would be enough to take the lives of that mother and son pair. Needless to say, she hated that bitch so much that she wanted to bite her flesh and swallow her blood. However, Su Shitao knew very well that she was probably as far away from Arbor as 1,000 or 10,000 mountains. She could only look up to that person for the rest of her life. Previously, she had been beaten for nothing and scolded for nothing. Especially now, that bitch actually gave birth to a little imperial grandson so smoothly. In his joy, the emperor even pardoned the world. It was clear how much he doted on his little imperial grandson. This bitch's mother rose because of her son. In the future, no one would be able to shake her position. Chapter 5383. Thinking of this, Su Shitao couldn't help but gnash her teeth in hatred. Could it be that the woman in front of her was someone she couldn't catch up to even if she tried? Suddenly, a burst of pain came from the palm of her hand, causing her to snap back to her senses from her myriad of thoughts. Looking down, she realized that she was being forced to kneel on the ground and was being taught a lesson with a long ruler. Su Shitao struggled with all her might, her voice full of fear as she asked, what are you doing? Miss Su, since you don't know the rules, then let us servants properly teach you what rules and etiquette are. Kai Chi and Kai Xiu's faces were cold as they gave a meaningful glance to the few palace maids beside them. Everyone hurriedly held her down firmly on the ground. Sai Chi held the ruler in her hand and slammed it heavily into Su Shitao's palm, causing her to cry for her father and mother. Su Shitao. Qiao Mu retorted coldly, I've tolerated you again and again. Could it be that you think that this crown prince consort has an extremely good temper and will allow you to jump up and down as you please? Speaking of which, it's really my tolerance that harmed you. You didn't repent and instead went from bad to worse. Now you dare to openly lay your hands on the little imperial grandson. I didn't. Su Shitao jumped in fright and quickly raised her head, glaring at Arbor with a pair of angry eyes. You wronged me. Even if she died, she would never admit that she did have the intention to harm others. She really wanted to take advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, and it would be best if she could get rid of that hateful mother and son. In particular, she knew that Imperial Brother's little white flower concubine was very weak after giving birth. She couldn't get out of bed at all, nor could she make any big movements. She even sounded like she was about to stop breathing when she shouted. After Arbor gave birth to the child, she would definitely need to recuperate, so she might not be able to take precautions. As long as she was given a chance, the effect would definitely be very good. Unfortunately, Su Shitao's wishful thinking had been seen through before he could even make a move. Everything he hid in his possession had been found out and became evidence of his crimes. Su Shitao, this crown prince consort is fed up with you. Xiao Mu gazed at her coldly as she spoke dryly. Just these words frightened Su Shitao greatly. His entire body couldn't help but tremble slightly as he cried out in a stern voice, I didn't. I was also deceived by those villains. I don't know what kind of improved medicine can be made from these things. I don't know. What are you doing? With a terrified expression, Su Shitao looked at the two bodyguards who had grabbed her arms. Let go of me. Let go of me. Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law. Su Shitao screamed and roared, Do you want to leave me to die? Think about my big brother. If my big brother knew that you didn't save me when I was dying and watched me die, he wouldn't have done anything. I can't guarantee that you won't have a good time. Princess Consort Zheng looked at her with a complicated gaze and sighed. I will personally explain this matter to His Highness. Now that the entire Prince Zheng's estate had been inexplicably implicated by her, the young crown princess was already giving face to Her Majesty the Empress by not attacking their Prince Zheng's estate at the first opportunity. No matter what, Prince Zheng was still Her Majesty the Empress' adopted son. Even if he had committed all kinds of evil and needed to be punished, Her Majesty had to personally punish him. This was what the young crown princess thought in her heart. She coldly glanced at the shouting Su Shitao. Chapter 5384. She raised her small hand and waved it slightly. Without another word, the two guards dragged Su Shitao out of the courtyard. Su Shitao was completely flustered. She struggled and shouted, What are you doing? Arbor. What are you trying to do? I'm King Zheng's younger sister. I'm His Highness's younger sister. You can't treat me like this. You can't, Su Shitao, who was being dragged by two guards, staggered and almost fell down. When she finally managed to steady herself, a trace of panic and fear flashed through Su Shitao's eyes. Her original haughty demeanor instantly vanished without a trace. She shouted to Arbor in a panic, Crown Princess, please forgive me. I really didn't intentionally take out those medicine bottles to harm people. I was just a little playful. Just what? She just wanted to take advantage of the young crown princess's illness and take her life. She even wanted to harm the newborn child, didn't she? Princess Consort Zheng swept a careless glance at Su Shitao. She was crying so hard right now that she looked like a tearful person. She no longer had her usual spoiled and willful appearance. If she had known this would happen, why did she do it in the first place? Su Shitao's stupidity caught her off guard. Princess Consort Zheng shook her head weakly. She clenched her handkerchief tightly in her hand, pondering how to cleanly remove the entire King Zheng estate from this muddy water. Subsequently, she realized that it was really very difficult to cleanly remove the entire King Zheng estate from top to bottom. After all, this matter involved the crown princess and His Highness the young imperial grandson. It was not so easy to resolve. Crown Princess. Princess Consort Zheng swallowed and braced herself to ask, May I know where the crown princess ordered people to take Tao? The young crown princess glanced at her indifferently. Holding the little dumpling in her arms, she said coldly, Su Shitao has committed treason against her superiors. This crown princess has ordered people to imprison her in the Ministry of Justice's prison to await trial. Do you have any objections? Princess Consort Zheng's entire body turned cold. She shook her head repeatedly and took a few steps back. She bowed and said, Crown Princess, please allow this concubine to take her leave first. The little crown princess didn't say anything and only glanced at her coldly. Why is Princess Consort Zheng in such a hurry? A cold voice sounded from the doorway. Princess Consort Zheng felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't help but stiffen her neck as she turned around in a daze. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, who was dressed in a luxurious black robe and had his hair tied up in a crown, strode over the threshold with a cold and handsome face that would not melt even after 1,000 years. He walked towards the young Crown Princess. "We were just about to send someone to your King Zheng estate. Have someone send Princess Consort Zheng off on the way." Princess Consort Zheng's expression changed in shock. She couldn't stop trembling as she shouted, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, the King Zheng estate has been wrongly accused. Ever since my younger sister, Su Shitao, was brought into the estate, her behavior has been unruly and condescending. She's completely disobedient. This concubine is indeed at fault for not supervising her strictly, but it's not to the extent that the entire King Zheng estate should lose their lives because of her stupidity." Prince Immerse sneered and didn't say much to her. He directly pointed at Xiao Yi and Yu Ba behind him. The two nodded in understanding and turned to bow respectfully to Princess Consort Zheng after receiving the order. "Please, Princess Consort." Princess Consort Zheng's emotions were all over the place. She staggered and hurriedly reached out to grab the door frame. Chapter 5385. Her heart was in turmoil as she turned back to look at the Crown Prince in horror. Her fingers gripped the door frame tightly, preventing her from falling to the ground. So, His Highness was already so dissatisfied with the Zheng household. Did he not want to tolerate the Zheng household for even a second after this? A trace of bitterness flashed across Princess Consort Zheng's lips. Seeing that the Crown Prince and his wife were ignoring them, she hurriedly turned and left. A cold glint flashed across the Crown Prince's eyes. He glanced in the direction Princess Consort Zheng left and shook his head. It's rare for the Shi family to have a sensible person. What a pity. Arbor pursed her lips and stuffed the little dumpling into Emolien's arms. Just now, that woman had another fragrance on her. I smelled it like the work of Madame Gowan. The Crown Prince's grip on his wife's hand tightened slightly, and a trace of sternness flashed across his eyes. You mean that old Madame Gowan is restless again? Ever since Du Chuanjiang's trip, Gowan had been much more well-behaved and would no longer cause trouble for the little Crown Princess for no reason. Why was she reverting to her old ways now? Well, Gowan was relying on the protection of her grandfather in Glorious City. Every day, Gowan used the excuse of visiting her sisters to reminisce with the Empress. This had actually helped her restore her good reputation. Thinking of this, a cold glint flashed across the Crown Prince's eyes. Since that idiot Gowan didn't want to live comfortably, then he would make her busy in the future. Seeing his cold expression, Arbor couldn't help but tug at his hand. I just felt that the powder on Su Shitao's body was somewhat familiar. It might not be Madame Gowan. She couldn't be bothered to smell the thick smell of low-quality powder. This matter is still rather strange. Arbor held Emolien's hand and said softly, looking at Su Shitao's stupid appearance, it really seems like she was set up by someone. She just didn't know who set her up. Emolien, who only wanted results and couldn't be bothered to ask about the process, curled her lips and said, "Who cares? In any case, we have both witnesses and material evidence now. Su Shitao's poisonous powder and insects can be used to concoct basic mutated medicinal liquid. It can be seen that the entire Prince Zheng's mansion is closely related to heavenly fate. The order he had given to Yuba and Xiao Yi was to capture everyone in King Zheng's residence and kill anyone who resisted. Well, don't ask why he was so cruel. The question was that they should never have tried to harm his wife. This matter had already touched his deepest bottom line. If he could tolerate it, what else could he tolerate? Won't this make things difficult for Mother? Jojo asked softly as he glanced at his husband. What's so difficult about it? Emolien snorted. You have to take responsibility for your mistakes. Brother Qingjing has let down his mother's trust in him and let down his mother's painstaking efforts. I want him to pay the price. Arbor sighed. He knew that this guy was stubborn, and it was useless to persuade him. Moreover, it was Su Shitao who wanted to scheme against them. Emolien would definitely be unable to tolerate it. I've asked someone to throw Su Shitao into the Ministry of Justice's prison temporarily. Emolien frowned slightly and held the little guy's hand. There's no need to worry so much. Leave the rest to me to deal with. You still need to recuperate more recently. Let me be at ease, all right? Arbor nodded reluctantly and muttered, I'm very curious now. Who on earth is the one who set up King Zheng's mansion? Catch up on 2 chapters after waking up. Chapter 5386. Mo Shikong, the Prince of Zheng, angrily stepped through the doorway and saw the man leisurely drinking tea in the hall. This person was dressed in green, his hair like a waterfall, his face like jade, and his figure slender. At this moment he was sitting in the center of the hall, holding the tea in his hand, and casually looking up at him. The anger in Mo Shikong's heart surged out. He quickly walked to the front of this person, and couldn't help but roar with a trembling voice, Was it you? Was it you the scheme you set up? Made Taoto walk into it herself. Hee, Prince Zheng, are you angry out of humiliation? A cold laugh came from behind him. Mo Shikong's body trembled slightly, and he quickly turned to look at the person who came. He saw a handsome man with a slight smile on his lips step through the door, waving the folding fan in his hand, and smiling politely at him. Mo Shikong was very clear that he didn't know this person in front of him. He abruptly turned to glare at the man sitting there drinking tea, and angrily asked with a trembling voice, Second young master, what do you mean? Who is this young master? Qin Exin faintly glanced at him, and said with a sneer, Why are you in such a hurry? Young Master Qin, the fire didn't reach you, so you naturally aren't in a hurry. Mo Shikong gnashed his teeth in hatred, and he angrily rebuked while pointing at the door, Do you know that they've come knocking on our door? The Crown Prince's people are holding my Wangfei and are knocking on our door. Mo Shikong sternly shouted, Second young master, what did you do? Young Master Omega Katoka faintly glanced at Mo Shikong, seemingly glancing at his flustered and exasperated expression. His expression was still very indifferent as he asked, Mo Lien brought people to surround the Prince of Zheng's residence? Mo Shikong was so angry that his soul was about to ascend to the heavens. Seeing his unperturbed appearance, he could only swallow his anger, stifling his anger, and try to use a calm voice to say, He didn't come. He only sent 2 subordinates. Then what are you afraid of? Omega Kotoku looked at Mo Shikong contemptuously. You're sitting in this position. Don't tell me you're afraid of a few subordinates of the Crown Prince party? Then why do you still think that the prince is plotting something big? You should rest early. Mo Shikong was fuming. Second young master, this is the current master of the River of Forgetfulness, Long Yun, clan leader Long. Mo Shikong looked at Mr. Long in surprise. He saw Mr. Long waving the fan in his hand and looking at him. He still had a kind smile on his face and seemed to be particularly approachable. Mo Shikong didn't know the details of this person. Seeing that he was amiable and smiling, he didn't want to put on a straight face. It was too unreasonable. Therefore, he nodded slightly at the smiling young master Long. Unexpectedly, the second young master's next sentence angered him so much that he almost turned hostile on the spot. We are both partners. King Zheng, the Lord of the River of Forgetfulness in front of you is much more straightforward than you. Compared to a mere King Zheng like you, he is the overlord of the vast Forgetful River. The entire Forgetful River is under his jurisdiction. He is not as hard to choose as you are. Since you're so indecisive and dilly-dallying, this young master will help you make a choice so that you can go ashore quickly. King Zheng's lips trembled slightly, his body trembling fiercely. He couldn't help but roar angrily from his throat. The choice you speak of is to frame my sister? Second young master, is all of this your doing? Chapter 5387. A servant in green, who had been standing behind the second young master, looked up coldly at King Zheng. King Zheng, please mind your words in front of my master. King Zheng's face was full of anger. He clenched his fists and suppressed his anger. Wang Chung. The young master of the Omega Kotoku raised his hand indifferently and dismissed the servant in green. Before King Zheng could suppress the anger in his heart, he heard the Lord of the River of Forgetfulness say with a smile, King Zheng, you've misunderstood the second young master. This young master Long was still smiling at him with a kind face. Although this person always had a smile on his face and looked very understanding, for some reason, King Jing, Mo Shikong, couldn't help but shudder when he heard his voice. Actually, this matter doesn't have much to do with the second young master. The main responsibility lies with me. The Lord of the River of Forgetfulness said to him with a smile. However, the more he smiled like this, the more it made Jing Wang's hair stand on end. He felt that this man in front of him seemed to be wearing a thick mask, and he couldn't read any thoughts from his face. The Lord of the River of Forgetfulness said with a smile, "When I passed by your courtyard, I saw your sister walking over from afar." I swear I was just joking with her." Young Master Long smiled brightly at Mo Shikong. "I didn't expect her to take it seriously. Take away all the bottles and jars that I've been fiddling with." The anger in Mo Shikong's heart skyrocketed. He glared at the Lord of the River of Forgetfulness, who was putting on an act and looking pale with fright. He raised his hand and pointed at Long Yun. His entire face was dark. What grudges did he have with this person? Why did he have to frame him like this? "It's strange, your sister doesn't know what those bottles and jars of mine are for." Young Master Long pursed his lips and looked a little aggrieved. "I already told her that these things aren't fun. Even a little bit of it can destroy a person's life. Who knew that your sister would be so bold?" Not only was she not afraid at all, she was very happy. He left happily with these bottles and jars in his hands. "How would I know that your sister would take it seriously? It was just a small joke." Mo Shikong was so angry that his vision turned black. He pointed at Long Yun and moved his lips. He couldn't help but shout, "You deliberately framed her." "What did I do to frame her?" Young Master Long pouted. Mo Shikong immediately saw that the elegant and handsome young master in front of him had turned into a pale old woman with wrinkles all over her face in less than a second, with cracking sounds coming from her bones. What kind of special ability was this? How could it be so terrifying? Mo Shikong's heart trembled, and he suddenly took a step back. In a matter of minutes, a handsome man had transformed into an old and decrepit woman. Despite such a transformation, there was no sign of abnormality in his body. If he was hiding among the enemies, he could transform into a new face and body at will. Then, it would be impossible to catch him even in 10,000 years. Long Yun chuckled and glanced at Mo Shikong. "Prince Zheng, don't think too much. Your sister really isn't worth it for me to rack my brains and frame her." In fact, he had just fiddled with the medicine bottle in the courtyard and pretended to accidentally pour some powder in. Chapter 5388. Su Shitao was already harboring evil intentions. When he saw the flowers and plants that were contaminated by the powder instantly wither, he could not suppress his curiosity and walked forward to ask. What happened next almost did not need him to explain. Su Shitao himself fell into the trap and developed step by step according to their plan. Long Yunjin did not understand why Mo Shikong was so angry. His own sister was stupid, so how could he have the face to blame others for framing her? If it wasn't for the fact that Su Shitao had always hated the young crown prince consort and wished for nothing more than to kill her, how would he have taken away all those bottles and jars? If his younger sister had the slightest bit of intelligence, she wouldn't have believed his words and really taken those bottles of poisonous powder and bugs to stuff them all into her own body, planning to use them to secretly deal with the crown prince consort. Therefore, Su Shitao could not blame anyone for ending up in this state. King Zheng clenched his fists tightly and could not help but roar in a low voice, "Second young master, everything is as you wish now. My mansion of King Zheng has been exposed to the public, and the reputation of treason will soon land on my head. The entire mansion of King Zheng colluding with the Heavenly Fate dynasty will soon be made public. But what good will it do you to do this? If I am in the imperial court and hide in the shadows, at least in the short term, I can still provide some help, right?" King Zheng, Mo Shikong, gritted his teeth and said in a low voice. Now everything was over. It was said that the Eastern Palace had found a pile of bottles and jars from Tao's body and used them to concoct the basic mutated liquid. This matter was indisputable. King Zheng's mansion of Heavenly Fate dynasty had colluded with the Heavenly Fate dynasty. Young Master Omega Kotoku smiled coldly at him. King Zheng, you don't really think that you can overthrow the Mo family with your own actions, do you? Not to mention that the great emperor is not so easy to fool, you can't even get past the crown prince. Moreover, the great emperor still has several blood brothers. This young master has helped you plan everything. No matter what, it seems that it will not be your turn to ascend the throne. Young Master Omega Kotoku glanced at him coldly. King, don't use the trick you used to fool my father in front of this young master. King Zheng was tongue-tied and could not say a word for a long time. What do you want to say? This young master saw that you were hesitating and indecisive several times, so I helped you make a choice. Zheng Wang Mo Shikong stared at the second young master's cold eyes, and his heart couldn't help but jump. You see, isn't everything fine now? King Zheng's king of King Zheng's Omega Kotoku's king. Mo Shikong's face was ashen from anger, and he glared hatefully at second young master Qin. Now that my identity has been exposed with Mo Lian's methods, he definitely won't let me off. Of course. Mo Shikong turned back and glared at Long Yun, who was standing aside. Long Yun nodded in agreement and said with a smile, your sister was whimsical and wanted to poison Xiao Xiao. With his character, it's naturally impossible for him to let your whole family go. Mo Shikong was so angry that his breath was stuck in his chest. He hated that he could not kill this abominable person in front of him. Since he knew that the matter would be so serious, he still had the nerve to make such a joke. He directly pushed his sister into the Ministry of Justice's prison and pushed the entire King Zheng's mansion into eternal damnation. Young Master Omega Kotoku had recovered and no longer looked like an old woman. Chapter 5389. Today, he was still an elegant young master with an excellent demeanor. However, although there was a hint of a smile like a spring breeze on his face, it made people's hearts involuntarily turn cold. The servants, who had been shouting and wrangling along the way, hurriedly threw themselves at Mo Shikong's feet and stammered, Your Highness, what should we do now? The Crown Prince's men have completely surrounded our Prince Zheng's estate. It's really impossible to escape. Your Highness, please give us some instructions. What should we do? Your Highness. Your Highness. Cries rang out one after another. Looking at those servants who were crawling on the ground and trembling incessantly, Mo Shikong, the Prince of Zheng, felt an intense anger in his heart. He suddenly had a feeling that the situation was hopeless. Does second young master want to put me to death? This Qin family's second young master did such a thing without any scruples. He directly tore off the mask that he had been hiding for so long and exposed his identity in front of everyone. How much enmity and resentment did he have with him? The second young master swept a glance at him and unhurriedly touched the ring on his pinky finger. A palm-sized triangular tent suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Do you have anything to pack? The second young master asked indifferently. When he said this, Mo Shikong's fury burned even more fiercely. Long Yun, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but curl his lips slightly, revealing a faint smile. This Omega Kotoku was really quite amusing. At this kind of life and death juncture, he still asked the other party if he wanted to pack his things? Who knew what he would have done earlier? Mo Shikong was also vexed over this matter. This Omega Kotoku clearly did it on purpose. He already knew that Mo Lian, that fellow, would send people to capture him. Why didn't he ask him to pack his things earlier? Now that things had come to a head, how could he possibly disregard his own life for some worldly possessions? Thus, he gritted his teeth and coldly said, No need to trouble yourself. That's really a pity. The Omega Kotoku sighed and silently glanced at Mo Shikong before raising his hand to put him into the tent. Mo Shikong was startled. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he was standing in a gorgeous courtyard. Clearly, this thing that looked like a tent should be a spatial spiritual residence built by an armament refiner. He hurriedly shouted outside, What about the people in my estate? The Omega Kotoku said coldly, This spatial container can't carry too many people. At most, it can only carry a few more. Then, quickly bring my parents and wives and concubines along. Second young Master Qin curled his lips and pretended to ask carelessly, Then you don't want these things in your estate anymore? In the face of such a disaster, who would still think about such trivial things? Shikong said without hesitation, no need. Bring one, my son, my father and mother. Not a moment later, second young Master Qin's aloof voice was heard. All right then. Jojo, don't worry about these troublesome matters. Lien reached out to help his wife to the bedside and said with a smile, take good care of your body. After a few days, when you're completely recovered, we'll go to the ruined temple in the western suburbs. Arbor's eyes brightened. Have you found my seed fragments? Lien nodded slightly. He held Arbor's hand and said, don't worry, it should be in the ruined temple in the western suburbs. It won't be long before we find it. Xiaomu joyfully nodded her head. Chapter 5390. Arbor couldn't help but twitch her mouth when she suddenly heard a faint sound coming from the window. She quietly complained to Lien, do you remember when you threw a diaper at the window last time? It directly landed on Xiao Ye's head with a strange fragrance, right? Lien silently twitched her mouth and coughed lightly. No way. Xiao Yi isn't squatting outside the window now. You can shout if you don't believe me. Xiao Yi should be raiding the Prince Zheng estate right now. He definitely wouldn't be squatting outside the window. Xiao Yi, Sir Jojo shouted. She then heard a rustling sound from the window, and a head popped out of the window. The head revealed a row of spotlessly white teeth and flashed her a full moon smile. This subordinate greets the Crown Princess. Does the Crown Princess have any orders? Sir Jojo blinked as he looked at the charcoal face in front of him. He instinctively felt that this face was very familiar, but he couldn't quite recognize who it was. Crown Princess, this subordinate is Hui Feng. However, Hui Feng was quick-witted. When he saw the little Crown Princess's strange and dazed expression, he immediately introduced himself and revealed his identity to the Crown Princess. The little Crown Princess revealed a look of sudden realization, and she sized up Hui Feng from head to toe no less than 3 times. She suddenly pointed at him and asked in surprise, Hui Feng, why are you so tanned? Hui Feng must have gone to mine ores, right? How did those shiny ores turn the handsome Hui Feng into this charred state? It would have been fine if the little Crown Princess didn't ask, but Hui Feng really wanted to cry when she did. A tragic life really didn't need an explanation. He spent all day in Huiping village directing the mining of ores, so his face was a pitch-black mess from being exposed to the elements. Venerable Immortal Jin Shang, Zhao Sheng, and Liang Yi have also returned? Hui Feng nodded. Does the Crown Princess want to see them? Arbor waved his small hand. Let everyone rest first. I don't have anything urgent to attend to. All right. Hui Feng said with a bitter expression. The holy stone ores dug up in Greiping village only filled 1 storage talisman. How much manpower and resources did they have to expend? As long as the formation set up by the ancestor of the Chaiyang clan was extremely huge, they would not be able to deal with it if they went any deeper. Xiao Mu gazed at them sympathetically before ridiculing. Back then, the old geezer even bragged in front of me, saying that no one in this world could dig up the grotto heaven immortal abode that he had buried besides me. Hui Feng nodded repeatedly and hastily said, Senior's words are true. If it wasn't for Supreme Immortal Venerable Jin and the others, we wouldn't even be able to break through the outer array. Actually, the saint veins we've dug up are just a drop in the ocean. Indeed, he did not manage to dig out the innermost holy vein. The ones that he had dug up were only the edges, which was equivalent to just scratching the surface. Senior Chaoyang is indeed an exceptionally capable person. If the Crown Princess wants to dig out all the holy veins, she'll probably have to make a trip herself. Arbor was startled and glanced at Hui Feng sympathetically. He suddenly patted Huifeng's shoulder. It's been hard on you. Hui Feng was so touched that he only wanted to cry. He quickly shook his head and said, It's not hard, it's not hard. This subordinate will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire for the Crown Princess. Lien cast a sidelong glance at him, her gaze landing on his charcoal-black face. Go wash your face. Hui Feng. He really wanted to burst into tears. After all, several months of mining was involved. Chapter 5391. That charred skin from being exposed to the wind and sun really wasn't something that could be recovered just by rubbing his face a few times. Master! Hui Feng really wanted to sob. Can we not assign subordinates to mine ors next time? Arbor patted Huifeng's shoulder and nodded sympathetically at him. Next time, find some brothers with dark faces to begin with. Emolian. Fuck, why did he want to laugh so much when he heard his wife bickering with his subordinates? Arbor took out a small porcelain bottle and stuffed it into Huifeng's hand. He patted his arm. Hui Feng, take a beautifying pill. It should help you recover quickly. There are also several special beautifying ointment in this bottle. I've made it into the size of a pill. Every time you finish bathing these days, crush the beautifying ointment and apply it to your face. This crown princess guarantees that you'll recover your original appearance in less than 10 days. Huifeng's mouth twitched fiercely. He clutched the bottle of beautifying pills in his hand and speechlessly raised his head to look at the crown prince. Why would a grown man like him eat a beautifying pill? If word got out, people would laugh their heads off. The crown prince glared at him warningly. Hui Feng instantly quieted down and nodded like a chick pecking at rice. He revealed a silly grin. Crown princess, you treat this subordinate like a master and mother. That's truly too good. Mo Lien face-bombed and kicked him lightly without thinking. Hurry and scram. Hui Feng was talking nonsense here all the time. From the looks of it, he just had too much free time. After Hui Feng left, Mo Lien laughingly scolded him and took out a storage talisman from her pocket. Put this storage talisman away. There's a lot of holy stones inside. Arbor shook his head. I don't need it for the time being. You can keep it. See if Rotten Peach and the others need it first. Mo Lien stroked his head but didn't argue with him. She nodded and put away the storage talisman. Did our son disturb you today? Arbor shook his head and said with a vexed expression, the little dumpling is too obedient. When I open my eyes, I eat and drink. When I close my eyes, I immediately fall asleep. Usually, she did not cry or make a fuss. Occasionally, she would make a little noise, but that was enough to make Jojo excited for half a day. Jojo shook his head and sighed. Your son is like you. He doesn't talk much. Mo Lien stared blankly at his wife's small figure as she turned around and pattered over to the bed. The corners of his mouth twitched speechlessly. Who was the quiet one here? When they first met in Kwoto village, he could count on his fingers the number of words she had said. Wife. Mo Lien walked up to her and followed her to the bed. You can't do this. What do you think? Arbor reached out and picked up the little girl who was lying on the bed. He glanced at his husband from the corner of his eyes. Shift the blame. Mo Lien pursed her lips and held Arbor's hand. You can't always think that our son is like me. Isn't he like you? The little crown princess sniffed and turned to ask Eunuch Chin, who was chuckling at the side. Eunuch Chin, tell me. He's like your highness the crown prince. The little imperial grandson is especially like your highness when you were young. He doesn't talk much, eats and sleeps well. He's very obedient. The crown prince, Eunuch Chen, whose family are you from? Back then, you always said that I was annoying. Mother Arbor sighed faintly and glanced at the crown prince. Husband, guess what mother said to me when she found out about the little dumpling's nickname? Mo Lien's mouth twitched. Wife. Chapter 5392. Arbor glanced at her husband and muttered in a low voice, I think mother is right. She said big glutinous rice ball and little dumpling are really a pair of father and son. Our son is just like you. Big? Big glutinous rice ball? Wasn't he called little glutinous rice ball before? He had upgraded, hadn't he? Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at his wife's serious expression. Jojo was actually serious. She probably agreed with her mother's words, you are glutinous rice ball's wife, Tuanzi's mother. The crown prince suddenly pounced on his wife, held her in his arms, and bit her, causing Lord Jojo to exclaim. The crown prince was too presumptuous. There were many little palace maids and eunuchs watching. He dared to act so brazenly. Jojo was itching to slap him. What are you doing? Everyone is watching. Who dares to watch? The crown prince shouted angrily. Eunuch Chen and the others had already left. What a joke! Did they have to wait for the crown prince to be free and chase them away himself? Only those who know and be tactful can live a long life. Arbor raised her hand and pinched him. Are you rebelling? Emolian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He raised his hand to stop her and shook his head. I wouldn't dare even if I had 10,000 guts. Arbor suppressed her laughter and nodded seriously. At least you know what's good for you. Let go of the crown princess. I won't let go. Prince Emo hugged her and didn't let go. He snorted angrily. Ever since Little Dumpling came out, all your attention has been on that guy. Jojo, after a while, you probably won't even know what your husband looks like. Arbor punched him on the head. Don't compete with your son for favor. Emolien looked at her aggrievedly and said in a slightly wavering voice, Jojo. Arbor tried his best to suppress his laughter. He tilted his head and looked at him. Suddenly his gaze fell behind him. His little face was slightly dazed. Emolien. Jojo poked him on the shoulder. Humph, what for? Crown Prince Emo responded in displeasure. His wife doted on his son more than she doted on him. The crown prince was in a bad mood. Arbor poked his shoulder a few more times. You, turn your head, turn your head. Emolien turned her head slightly and glanced behind her. Suddenly her eyes widened. He saw baby Emo, that little rascal, floating behind him. His entire body was suspended in midair, and his pair of pitch-black phoenix eyes were staring at him without blinking. His face was expressionless. Which father would be able to witness such a scene? Her son, who was not even a month old yet, was staring at her with his chilly eyes. She did not know when he had floated behind her, and his gaze was fixed on her. You're a baby. Please be a normal baby. Act like a human. Baby Emo smacked his little mouth and spat out a small mouthful of bubbles. He continued to look at his father expressionlessly and exchanged glances with him without blinking. Arbor quickly walked over and reached out to take baby Emo. This little kid was too cute. Look, he was clearly such a small child, but he had an expressionless old face. He was too much like his father. Emolien was a step ahead of his wife and carried the little rascal in his arms. Unexpectedly, this time, he managed to save some face for his old father and didn't use his internal energy to shake him off. My son, when I'm talking to your mother, can you not be a spirit behind my back? Emolien's reply was baby Emolien spitting out a mouthful of saliva. Was he human? Chapter 5393. With A, this fellow opened his toothless mouth and glanced disdainfully at his dad. Arbor circled around her husband and reached out to hug her son, but Jojo's lotus dodged her several times. What are you doing? Sir Jojo glared at his husband angrily. Emolien hugged her son and patted him twice. Wait a moment, wait a moment. I reckon he's about to poo. After he's done, hubby will wash him before handing him to you. That's fine too. The little stoic quickly retracted her hand and nodded earnestly. Don't throw the smelly diaper around this time. It'll be so embarrassing if you throw it on royal father's face. Emolien. It had to be said that Emolien, this fellow, had developed a set of experienced procedures after repeatedly waiting on her son to poo. As long as she paid attention to her son's complexion, she could guess that the little fellow was about to come. How did you know he's about to poo? The little stoic looked curiously at her husband, who was fiddling with a clean diaper. Hubby, you're much more adept at this. Try changing a baby's diaper 6 or 7 times a day. How can you not be adept? Prince Emo rolled his eyes. Jojo, don't tell me this fellow doesn't poo when I'm not around during the day? Arbor shook her small head. He doesn't even pee much, let alone poo. She suddenly paused, as if she had discovered a new continent. She said excitedly, Hubby, have you noticed that it's easier for air to poo when he's facing you? Emolien, Ma Jietchen, who had just entered the room, almost died from laughter when she heard this. She hastily interrupted and teased, That's right, that's right. I think Emolien has a face that makes baby Emo want to poo. Emolien simply didn't want to speak to this rotten peach blossom. Hubby, It's really been hard on you. The little stoic sighed and looked sympathetically at Emolien with sparkling eyes. It can't be helped. Little furball wants to poo whenever he sees you. In the future, you have to come back on time no matter how busy you are. Wife, if your eyes didn't flash with a faint smile of schadenfreude, your tone would seem much more sincere. Husband, don't panic. Things will get better when the little dumpling grows up. I'll have to trouble you for now. Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he nodded and dryly told his wife, it's not hard at all. Hu Shichen was laughing so hard that she fell over. She dragged a stool and sat down beside Emolien. Come let me see. My little dumpling really looks like Jojo. Emolien, this person's ability to lie through his teeth was really bad. She clearly had a wrinkled little face and nothing could be seen. Speaking of resemblance, the only thing that could be seen now was the little dumpling's deep and beautiful phoenix eyes. Wasn't he just like his father? Most importantly, his wife wasn't a modest person. As soon as someone said that her son looked like her, she would immediately nod in agreement with a "you have good taste" expression. She would look at that person and praise him repeatedly. You're absolutely right. The little dumpling really looks like me. He'll definitely be very beautiful in the future. Emolien glanced at Hu Shichen and saw this guy secretly twitching the corner of his mouth. Clang! The hall's door made a heavy noise. Sir Guangguang ran in breathlessly. When he saw Arbor, it was as if he had seen a relative he hadn't seen in 800 years, and he howled as he pounced on her. And Xiao. Wu the little monk and I were beaten up today. Arbor was startled and turned around to see the little monk and little monkey walking in. Chapter 5394. What happened? Xiao Mu was at a loss for words as she stroked the light-condensing mirror's bald head. This 10,000 years old congealing Jing, who is old but doesn't have wisdom, its intelligence is probably not as high as the little monk's Kongung, come to mother. Arbor waves at him. The little monk hastily strode over to Xiao Mu's side and stood still. What happened to your face? Arbor slightly narrows her eyes. Her sharp gaze falls on the left side of his face. There's a shallow bruise. If you don't look carefully, you won't notice it. Nothing happened. Congealing Jing cries more and more miserably, howling louder and louder. I was beaten by someone and I also have a bruise here on my neck. Arbor looks at the neck that congealing Jing is pointing at, and sure enough, she sees a 2-finger-wide bruise. What happened, Kongung? Arbor pulls the little monk to her side, looking at him with a serious face. Who bullied you? The little monk scratches his head, looking at Arbor with a bit of embarrassment. Mother, did I cause trouble for you? Actually, it's nothing. What do you mean nothing? The little monkey angrily jumps in front of Arbor, his face filled with righteous indignation. Little sister, when we were monitoring the teacher's lesson today, someone provoked us. Congealing Jing hurriedly nods. A few especially bad children provoked the three of us, looking for trouble. Amitba. The little monk puts his hands together, blinking his eyes. 2 little benefactors, you don't have to say any more, it's actually just a small matter. Seeing the little monk like this, Arbor knows that he's going to start nagging again, so she quickly interrupts him and changes the topic, pretending to be curious. Guangguang, why don't you tell us, who provoked the 3 of you? Your Highness. Eunuch Chen, who had hurried over, glanced at the 3 children with a strange expression. He hurriedly bowed and said, Your Highness, the Crown Princess, Lord Lu from the Imperial Astronomer, and Assistant Minister Zhang from the Ministry of Justice have come to ask for forgiveness. Emolien stared blankly, then glanced at the 3 little ones without batting an eyelid. Come out with me. Lord Guangguang hurriedly grabbed the little monkey's sleeve and shook it secretly. The latter lowered its head and glared at him fiercely. The little fellow was so frightened that he retracted his hand and quickly stood properly. Arbor saw that the 3 of them were exchanging flirtatious glances. His heart was slightly moved. He held the little monk's hand and patted it lightly. Kongung, you've never lied before. The small monk hurriedly said, Amitba, monks do not lie. Arbor rubbed his head. Then tell me, are these people who came to ask for forgiveness related to your matter? The little monk thought for a moment, then nodded his bald head honestly. Mother, don't be angry, okay? Arbor pinched his little chubby face. I'll settle the score with you guys later. After saying that, she went to settle her son, who had fallen asleep after pooping, and turned to leave the hall. When she reached the entrance of the main hall, she heard the faint sound of children sobbing before she even stepped through the door. When she entered, she saw a row of 7 to 8-year-old children kneeling at the entrance of the main hall. Several stern-looking imperial court officials were pleading for forgiveness to the crown prince. Arbor glanced at the row of children kneeling on the ground. When she saw their faces clearly, she couldn't help but stare blankly. Chapter 5395. The group of children kneeling on the ground looked extremely miserable. Not to mention their bruised faces, their eyes were swollen like walnuts from crying. When they saw the little crown princess leading Guangguang and the little monk into the main hall, their eyes blazed with hatred when they met their enemies. The children's gazes as they stared at Guangguang and the little monk were truly peerless. Official Lu of the Imperial Astronomer repeatedly apologized to His Highness the Crown Prince. Your Highness, please forgive us. My unfilial son was rude and offended the little sir. This lowly official has already taught him a harsh lesson. Lu Yime's chubby little face had 2 lines of tear stains, and he cried even harder when he heard this. Xiao Mu speechlessly glanced at the children who were kneeling unsteadily. She walked up and quietly asked, "What's going on?" Everyone in the room was instantly silenced. The children who were originally crying and making a fuss also looked at each other now. They shut their little mouths tightly and didn't dare to make a sound with flushed faces. Evidently, the adults had already harshly admonished them at home. Don't be rash in front of His Highness the Crown Prince, especially don't yell and cry in front of the Crown Princess. Lu Yime had 2 lines of tears and snot running down his face. There was a bruise on his eye, and his chin was swollen. He looked mournfully at the stoic-faced crown princess in front of him and didn't even dare to breathe loudly for a moment. Arbor turned to look at congealing Jing, who was cowering on the side like a quail, and his gaze turned slightly severe. Guangguang, did you guys hit them? The little monkey also didn't dare to speak now and hid next to the door, his 2 small hands clutching the door without speaking. Kong, speak. The little stoic lowered her head to look at the little monk. The little monk blinked and nodded honestly. We hit them. 3 against a group, and they were all beaten down. Everyone, why did they fight? Arbor asked with knitted brows. I don't know. The little monk looked at Arbor in bewilderment, but his expression was very magnanimous. I just heard Guangguang shout, fight. Little monkey rushed up. I thought I have to be loyal, so I also went up. The corners of Emolien's mouth twitched. Beside her, Hu Shichen was convulsing with laughter. He raised his hand to rub the little monk's head and praised, "What a loyal and good child." The little monk secretly glanced at Arbor. Mother, did I do something wrong? The little stoic ignored him and directly turned to look at the light-condensing mirror. Guangguang. Guangguang Dren took a step back with a guilty conscience. When he saw Jojo Dren's cold gaze sweeping over him, he hurriedly confessed, Auntie, Lu Yime is too despicable. He's been snatching my drumsticks for 3 days in a row. You're even fighting for seats. He always thinks that he's the boss and forces us to be his underlings. If I don't teach him a lesson, the heavens will not tolerate it. Arbor, you idiot, are you still a 10,000-year light-condensing mirror? Earlier, you wanted to suffer in order to save face and refused to call me auntie, but now, once you jump out of the age gap, you freaking let yourself go. I told you to protect Kong, but you immediately assumed the role of a child and actually fought over drumsticks with a child whose real age is only 7 or 8 years old. Don't you feel guilty and ashamed? Among these 3 fellows, apart from the little monk who is truly 6 years old, the other 2 only look immature. Look at how ruthless they are, beating up a group of children in minutes. Chapter 5396. Truly it was very good. The little monkey probably also saw that Arbor was about to get angry, so he hastily ran to her side. He slightly swayed Arbor's sleeve and said pitifully, Little sister, Don't be angry. I swear, it won't be like this next time. On the side, Guangguang also nodded continuously and looked at the female Jinx in front of him with trepidation. He also knew that his actions were a bit absurd. But at that time in the cafeteria, there were so many brats watching. If he didn't fiercely teach Liu Yimei a lesson, how could he live up to his super high martial prowess? Moreover, he had already wanted to beat Liu Yimei up for a long time when he looked at his chubby face. Arbor expressionlessly looked at Guangguang and the other two and reprimanded, "It's not that I don't allow you to retaliate. It's not wrong for you to retaliate when others bully you. Why must the guilty party complain first and make false accusations?" Arbor coldly snorted as she stared at Sir Guangguang's evasive eyes. Before this, Arbor really thought that someone had bullied the three of them in the kindergarten. In the end, no one had bullied them at all. Instead, it was 1 against 3, 3 against a group, and all of them were knocked down. Those children kneeling on the ground clearly had injuries on their faces, and there were probably even more hidden injuries on their bodies. How was this a group fight between these 3 frauds? It was clearly crushing a bunch of rookies and feeling very good about themselves. Arbor coldly said, "Give me your hand." She casually took out a ferrule from her inner world and looked at the 3 brats solemnly. Sir Guangguang jolted in fright and immediately hugged Arbor's leg, wailing at the top of his lungs, "Auntie, we won't dare to deceive you again in the future. Please forgive us this time and don't beat us." A cold smile floated on Arbor's lips. "In your dreams," the little stoic said coldly, "do you still dare to deceive people next time? How dare you put on an act in front of Jojo-sama? I'll expose you in minutes." In the end, Arbor knocked on each of their palms 3 times, causing the 3 children to groan and laugh bitterly. Arbor sent the 3 of them to kneel in the small Buddha hall. Then, he turned around and distributed a lot of healing medicine to the children of the adults. After a series of instructions, Official Liu and the others from the Imperial Astronomer were all overwhelmed by the favor and thanked him profusely. After Lord Liu and the others left with the children, Prince Mo grabbed Arbor's hand and said, "You really made them kneel in the small temple for the whole night? What? You want to plead for mercy?" Prince Mo hurriedly shook his head like a rattledrum. "The guilty ones complain first. You should be punished for not telling the truth." Arbor glared at him. "It's all your fault. She didn't know how to teach her children. All she did was spoil them and give them whatever they wanted. Back then, Yuer and Shaosen were led astray by you. Wife, can we not bring up the past?" Prince Mo wanted to cry but had no tears. Why did Yuer and Shaosen get dragged into this all of a sudden? Weren't they innocent? At night, Guangguang and the others were sighing in despair inside the small Buddha hall. Suddenly, they felt a chilly breeze behind their necks. When they turned around to look, they discovered that the door to the small Buddha hall had somehow opened a crack. The 3 shrunk their necks and almost fainted when they turned around. They saw baby Mo hanging in front of them, his black eyes staring fixedly at them. Fuck, be a mature baby. Who are you freaking scaring in the middle of the night? Chapter 5397. The 3 little ones cried out in unison, looking at baby Mo who was hanging in front of them with stupefied expressions. Master? Lord Guangguang's tears were about to fall. He was the closest to little Master, and when he turned his head, he saw a certain little one wrapped in a little swaddling cloth, staring at him expressionlessly. Why did this scene look a little strange and terrifying? Little Monk smacked his little lips, pursed his lips, and coughed lightly. Little dumpling, what are you doing in the middle of the night? This small Buddha hall was a little far away from the East Palace's main hall to begin with. In the middle of the night, they could only hear the wind howling outside. Who would have thought that when they turned their heads, they would see a little thing hanging in midair, staring fixedly at them. Baby Mo abruptly fell from midair. It scared Lord Guangguang so much that he hurriedly rushed forward and stretched out his arm to catch his little master. You, what are you doing? Little Monkey also hurriedly jumped up and surrounded baby Mo with Kong Kong. Looking down, they saw baby Mo staring at them with a pair of black eyes. The little arms and legs wrapped in swaddling cloth moved, and a few lollipops suddenly hit their heads. Lord Guangguang looked down at the lollipops on the ground and hurriedly picked them up. Little Monk didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at him and said, "Little dumpling, did you wander here in the middle of the night just to give us candy?" Sigh, it really scared me to death. Little Monkey very contentedly reached out to take a candy, peeled off the wrapper, and stuffed it into his mouth. Auntie is telling you, scaring people to death. You can't be like this in the future. But speaking of which, we are really unlucky today. Who would have thought that those cowards would actually complain to their parents? Their father even brought those cowards to find little Missy to make trouble for us. Simply preposterous. Little Monkey sat cross-legged on the ground and slapped his thigh angrily. Isn't that so? Lord Guangguang, who was carrying the little dumpling, was also not happy to kneel. He simply sat down and said angrily, "Those cowards, on the surface, they were respectful to us, but later on, they complained to their parents. The next time I see them, I will beat them up every time I see them." The small monk wrinkled his nose and clasped his hands together. "Amitba, you're not right. You'll teach my younger brother bad things. Furthermore, I feel that the lords who came today didn't seem to be here to complain at all. Instead, they seem to be here to apologize. It's just that Nyang Qin felt that we were in the wrong. Moreover, one must have love for one's schoolmates and not be too heavy-handed. That's why they punished us by making us kneel here." The little monk nodded his little head in a serious manner. "You too should be more careful in the future. Before you do anything, you have to use your brain." "Shut up." Little Monkey roared at him impatiently and licked his lollipop. "Why are you so long-winded? You're so young, yet you act like an old man." Kong Kong blushed and quickly retorted, "I'm not long-winded, I'm just a little talkative." Lord Guangguang stretched out his hand and stroked the little monk's bald head. With a serious expression, he said to him, "Why are you arguing with a girl? You see, my uncle-in-law never fights with my auntie. You have to know that you can't win. If you can't win, you'll be scolded. The gains don't make up for the losses." The little monk closed his mouth thoughtfully and obediently sat beside Lord Guangguang without saying anything. Chapter 5398. The little monkey grumbled angrily, "After those cowards made a fuss today, I didn't even get to eat dinner. Humph. If only I could have a bowl of hot mushroom soup right now, sigh." The little monk didn't have high expectations, but when he thought of his mushroom soup, he felt even more wronged. What was the use of having an inner world? His storage talisman was taken away by his mother before he was punished to kneel, and his inner world was sealed as well. Now, he only had a praying mat for him to kneel on, and it was especially miserable. He was really innocent in today's matter. This little monk was also punished to kneel while watching the show, and didn't have to do anything from the start to the end. While they were talking, a big pot of soup suddenly appeared in front of the three little ones. The hot soup was still boiling, and there were all kinds of vegetables in the pot, including the mushrooms that the little monk had been thinking about for a long time. In the blink of an eye, there was a plate of roasted chicken, a plate of red braised meat, and 3 bowls of shiny holy rice. "Master, you are our savior." Lord Guangguang's tears were about to fall again. He held the bowl of holy rice with a touched expression, and without another word, he picked up his chopsticks and started eating. Kong Kong raised his hand and patted the baby's swaddling clothes. "Little brother, you are really capable." The little monkey scooped a bowl of soup, and after taking a sip, he paused and turned to look at baby Mo thoughtfully. "Hey, don't you think that it is very strange that he can open an inner world at such a young age? What's strange about it? My family's little dumpling was a God Realm Level 8 expert when he was born, and he advanced to God Realm Level 10 in a short while. What was strange about having an inner world? Now that someone came to tell them that baby Mo had a God Realm with him when he was born, they wouldn't find it strange at all." The little monkey ate 2 mouthfuls of rice and nodded. "That's true, little dumpling is really the most talented person I have seen in the past 300 years. What 300 years? I haven't seen a second person in the past 10,000 years who can compare to my family's little master." Kong Kong glanced at the two of them, and silently ate 2 pieces of mushroom. One of you stayed in the sun-moon mystery realm for a few hundred years. The other was suppressed in the depths of the sea for 10,000 years. I haven't seen many people in total. Shut up. The two little ones shouted at the little monk in unison. The little monk held the small bowl and cast a glance at them. He puffed up his cheeks and resentfully shut his small mouth. Humans were all like this. They couldn't listen to the truth. Baby Mo, who was originally lying on Master Guangguang's lap, suddenly stood up and flew lightly to Kong Kong. The little monk quickly put down the bowl and chopsticks in his hand and reached out to catch him. She saw the baby's two black eyes staring at her. She immediately felt very happy. Brother, we're not quarreling. We're just bickering, the small monk explained in a strange manner. Then he felt that it was somewhat funny. Her younger brother was still so young and couldn't understand. The three little ones had a great appetite and finished half a pot of soup. Half of the roast chicken was also eaten by the little monkey and Lord Guangguang, but the plate of red braised meat was not touched. After eating, the three of them worked together to move the leftovers to the outside of the small temple. Then, they sneaked back and pretended to kneel in front of the shrine for half an hour. The little monk hugged baby Mo and recited the scriptures while kneeling there. Suddenly his small head sank down and almost hit baby Mo's big head. He was shocked and hurriedly stabilized his body. Looking down, he saw the baby opening his toothless mouth, as if he was laughing at him. The little monk's heart warmed and he smiled at him. Chapter 5399. The little monkey didn't look like he was kneeling anymore. His back drooped as he curled up into a tiny ball, and he cried pitifully, "Sigh, if there was a blanket right now, I would be able to fall asleep immediately." After he said that, they saw a mattress on the floor beside them, and two brand new brocade quilts were placed on the soft mattress. The little monkey quickly crawled over and hugged baby Mo, kissing him twice. "Little dumpling, youngest aunt really loves you to death. You're truly a good, considerate, and sensible child. Youngest aunt won't keep them company anymore. I'm going to sleep first." Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. Out of the corner of their eyes, they saw the little monkey roll onto the mattress without a care for his image, shake open the two quilts, and crawl in. Sir Guangguang yawned and glanced miserably at the thick and soft mattress on the floor. Then I'll also sleep for a bit. I'll kneel again after I wake up." Willpower truly couldn't overcome a sleepy heart. Sir Guangguang also surrendered and rolled onto the mattress. He pulled up a corner of the quilt and fell into a deep sleep. Baby Mo squirmed in the little monk's arms. The little monk was also extremely sleepy, but he still knelt there and said with half-closed eyes, "Kneel for a bit longer. You have to bear the consequences of your own mistakes." In the middle of the night, Mo Lien kept feeling a pair of bright eyes staring at him. He used extremely strong willpower to open his eyes and rolled up from the bed. He happened to meet his wifey's small, stoic, and expressionless face. He face-bombed and exclaimed, "Wifey, what are you doing in the middle of the night instead of sleeping?" He was really going to be scared to death by his wifey. Sitting next to you in the middle of the night and looking at him with a faint gaze, Mo Lien really wanted to cry. The little stoic pursed her lips and suddenly lifted the quilt. She pointed at the mattress and said indifferently, "What's missing?" Mo Lien looked down at his bewildered handsome face. When he saw his wifey's solemn and serious expression, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. "Son, where's our son?" He remembered that before going to bed he had helped the little ancestor play a game. Then, he had washed him clean and was carried over by his wife. Prince Mo hurriedly got up and flipped the blanket and pillows to search for his son. However, his son was nowhere to be found. He broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly turned to look at his wife. Son. Without another word, the little stoic pulled out her hand and punched his head. "You don't even know that your son is missing. No wonder my mother has always reminded me that you men are not reliable at all. You have to worry about everything as your mother." Prince Mo stared blankly at his wife, who had suddenly lost her temper. His heart was beating like a drum. Wife. He called out to her weakly. The little stoic said irritably, "What should I say about you? Do you admit your mistake? Mo Lien nodded repeatedly, looking like she was admitting her mistake. She asked carefully, Son, where did our son go? Relying on you to keep an eye on our son, you wouldn't even know if our son was taken away 100 years ago. Prince Mo glanced at his wifey aggrievedly. Follow me. The little stoic put on her clothes and put on her shoes before casually wrapping herself in a cloak. Mo Lien was bewildered as he followed his wifey out of the main hall. At this time, the moon was shining brightly, and the pitch-black night sky was dotted with stars. A slightly chilly wind blew in their faces. Mo Lien reflexively grabbed Arbor's hand and pulled her into his embrace. Chapter 5400. Jojo. He lowered his head to tighten her cloak before hugging her tightly. It won't happen again. Arbor pursed her small lips and punched his back. These past 2 days, Mother has been nagging me, saying that I don't know how to take care of a child and that I'm unreliable. She didn't see you. You're even more unreliable. Mo Lien quickly promised, next time, I'll definitely be reliable, extremely reliable. Xiao Mu hummed in response and nodded proudly. All right, then I'll forgive you this time on behalf of my son. When did you notice that he was missing? Mo Lien asked curiously. A minute before you woke up. Mo Lien, he looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then aren't you the same as me? What's the same? Hey, not the same, not the same. She really was a tsundere baby, bristling as soon as she was mentioned. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he quickly reached out to pacify her. You're reliable. You're the best mother in the world. The little stoic felt more at ease and nodded with a okay. Of course. In the dark night, a figure flashed in front of them. A pair of bright eyes on a pitch-black face smiled at them. Master, this way. The two people walked hand in hand under the moonlight for about half a quarter of an hour before they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What was going on? They really wanted to ask, how did their son run all the way from the Eastern Palace's main hall to this remote courtyard? Both of them tensed up and didn't speak. However, Hui Feng said very understandingly, Master, little master is especially awesome. When I was crouching on the tree, I saw him float out of the bedroom's window and float all the way here. He didn't pause at all. He also didn't come down to rest. We encountered a wild cat on the way. This subordinate was afraid it would bite little master, so before I could do anything, I saw that cat suddenly fly out with its 4 hooves upside down. Hui Feng pointed at the roof across from them. It's over there. As parents, their feelings were a bit complicated as they looked up at the roof that Hui Feng was pointing at. Sure enough, he saw a multicolored kitten curled up on the roof, trembling and screaming pitifully. The little stoic's mouth twitched, and she expressionlessly said, Take it down. Alrighty. Hui Feng suddenly leaped onto the roof and brought the kitten down in a few moves. Sir Jojo and Prince Mo looked at each other with complicated expressions. Their own son had sneakily floated out of the main hall, and as parents, they actually didn't know anything. This was really the biggest joke in the world. When the two arrived at the entrance of the small Buddha hall, 2 hidden guards stepped forward and pushed the door open, bowing to invite the two inside. The two of them stepped through the door, only to see 2 rows of faint candlelight illuminating the room. The room was burning with silver charcoal, but it didn't seem cold. A large bed was placed next to the praying mats in front of the shrine. There were 2 mattresses and 1 mattress. It looked really thick and warm. Their son was lying on empty stomach, and the 3 little imps were sprawled out in their sleep. Empty's fist was pressed against the little monkey's face, and the little monkey's feet were stepping on Guangguang. Guangguang was curled up in the bedding next to them, not caring about his head and exposing half of his butt. This row of sleeping postures was truly incomparably ecstatic. Arbor couldn't resist chuckling. Looking at these comical little guys, all the anger in his heart disappeared without a trace. Mo Lien looked at him with a smile in her phoenix eyes. Chapter 5401. The two of them walked up and adjusted the children's sleeping postures. They wanted to reach out to hold baby Mo, but they discovered that the little monk was tightly protecting him with both hands. Mo Lien originally wanted to gently pry open the empty hands, but she discovered that his brows were twitching, as if he was about to wake up. Arbor tugged at her and said softly, "Let's go out first." The two of them lit up the silver charcoal fire a little before walking out hand in hand. After closing the door to the small Buddha hall, they couldn't help but smile at each other. Hui Feng walked up with a grin and said, "Master, little master is amazing. He's such a small baby, so where do you think all these things came from?" He pointed at the empty pots and plates that several hidden guards carried over and said with a chuckle, "Little master and the other three brought out the remaining half after they were full. I even suspect that they purposely brought it out to reward us." Mo Lien's mouth twitched. It was obvious. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought it out. These children were all shrewd. Arbor glanced back at the small Buddha hall in amusement. "You don't know, but after they were full, little master took out a large quilt and mattress and went to sleep on the floor. The hidden guards were stupefied at that time. They really didn't expect that little master, who was still so young, could move soup, water, quilt, and mattress into his inner world just like that. But the problem was, when did he take these things?" Mo Lien waved her hand, dismissing Hui Feng and the others. She turned to look helplessly at Jojo. "Wife, is there something you haven't told your husband?" Arbor blinked and coughed lightly. "It's not a big deal. It's just that I only discovered it recently. Our son seems to be able to enter and exit the star domain at will. Chiu told me in private. Our son isn't like you guys, who need to carry a branch of the sacred tree by his side. After leaving the sovereign capital, he can't enter the star domain. Our son seems to be able to enter the star domain at will wherever he goes. He can also summon holy water, holy wood, and holy earth. I just don't know if he can see a vast starfield in his dantian." Mo Lien widened her eyes and looked at her little wife in disbelief. Then what about him?" Arbor nodded sincerely and patted Mo Lien's waist sympathetically. "He should be the richest baby in the world." Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her. She smiled and joked, "My dear Qiao, then wouldn't all your hard work over the years have been in vain? You're just making a wedding dress for your son." "A son doesn't need a wedding dress." Okay. Everything my Joe says makes sense." Arbor blinked, leaned into his arms, and said softly, "Actually, after knowing this, I'm very happy. Although our little dumpling has already broken through to the 10th level of the divine realm at such a young age, he is truly too small and too weak. Sometimes, when I look at him, it seems that anyone can break his thin arm with just a finger. Now that the situation is tense and uncertain, danger lurks everywhere. I feel much more at ease knowing that little dumpling has the star domain to protect himself. At the very least, if bad people came to capture him, he could immediately hide in the star domain, couldn't he? Jojo, be good. Don't worry, okay?" Mo Lien lowered his head and kissed her gently on the forehead. "With you and me around, we will protect little dumpling. We definitely won't let anything happen to him. Jojo, don't worry too much, okay?" Chapter 5402. Arbor nodded. Mo Lien, now I can truly understand Long Chuyun's mentality back then. Back then, she tried her best to conceal the truth and didn't tell me anything, Arbor said with a faint sigh. Actually, she didn't want me to come to the divine continent. As a mother, she only wanted me to let go of the burden of hatred and grow up peacefully and obediently. Even if she left me in a small farmhouse, as long as I could grow up happily, I think she would be perfectly satisfied. She didn't ask for you to be rich and noble, only for you to be healthy for the rest of your life. This was Mother's initial wish. Seeing her in his arms, Mo Lien gently caressed her cheek and said, "Perhaps all the mothers in the world think this way." Arbor tilted her little head and glanced at him. "Your son strolls outside in the middle of the night. This is a very bad habit. How do you plan to educate him?" Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if I reason with him, he probably won't listen in his current state. Besides, even if I reason with him with my fists, you won't agree. If he dared to lay a finger on his son, with his wifey's protective personality, It was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't be beaten to death. Forget it. Arbor took out a spirit-binding rope from her inner world. How about tying him to me tonight? Emolien was speechless. After a long while, she said in amusement, I don't think this little spirit-binding rope can bind our son. Arbor blinked and nodded in all seriousness. She raised her hand and patted her husband's chest. Husband, then make a rope that can bind him. This important task could only be left to the divine weapon master in front of her. Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Inside the Ministry of Justice's dungeon, at the end of the corridor, in the innermost and dark prison cell, Su Shitao's hair was disheveled. He pounded on the prison cell door and shook it vigorously as he roared, Where is everyone? Where did they all die to? You bastards, how dare you treat me like this? Sooner or later, I will put all of you to death by 1,000 cuts. Princess Consort Jing was sitting cross-legged in the cell adjacent to hers. Although his face was dark and gloomy in the cell, at least his clothes were still clean and tidy. Unlike Su Shitao, who had been jumping up and down in the cell for the past 2 days, no one paid any attention to her. Instead, she had made a mess of herself. Su Shitao smashed the prison door for a long time, but seeing that it didn't budge, he panted and fell to the ground. He pounded the wet grass under him and screamed angrily, That bitch! How long are you going to keep us here? None of this has anything to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. She simply hated it too much. The whole thing clearly had nothing to do with her, but in the end, with just a few words from that slut, she was thrown into such a dark dungeon, never to see the light of day again. What was she doing? Just because she was the crown prince consort, did she think that she could cover the sky with one hand and make everyone who didn't like her suffer? Su Shitao pounded the prison cell hatefully. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Princess Consort Jing, who was sitting steadily in the neighboring cell. He simply couldn't vent his anger. Su Shitao raised her nose and eyes, and she couldn't help but shriek, Shi Yongyan, you're actually very calm, huh? Heh, you didn't scream or jump these past few days. You ate whatever food was given to you and drank whatever porridge was given to you. You even lived quite comfortably. Chapter 5403. Su Shitao was on the verge of a breakdown, but his good sister-in-law was calmer and more composed than anyone else, as steady as Mount Tai. This was the greatest irony in the world. Compared to this sister-in-law, Su Shitao felt that she was practically a born clown. She hopped here and there all day, but in the end, not only was she of no help, she even became a laughingstock for this sister-in-law every day. Although her sister-in-law didn't say it, she must despise her in her heart. Su Shitao shouted harshly, Sister-in-law, I'm not criticizing you. After all, your maternal family is a reputable and prestigious Shi family in Dragonflame City. After this happened, look at yourself. What did you get? Did your maiden family send anyone to visit you? Did they send you some food and a change of clothes? Nothing at all. Heh, after we entered the prison, all our spirit weapons and treasured clothes were plundered. Even our inner worlds were sealed. Every day, we can only live with grievances. We can't eat enough and sleep well. Has your maiden family ever cared for you in the slightest? Nothing at all, right? To think that you can still live so calmly. Aren't you the least bit anxious? Seeing that Shi Yongyan didn't say anything, Su Shitao was so angry that she kicked the wooden pillar of the adjacent prison cell and shouted in exasperation, What are you so calm about? You've long been abandoned by the Shi family. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to keep up the pretense. The Shi family doesn't want you. My big brother doesn't want you either. Heh, you're really a failure as a person. Su Shitao seemed to have gone mad as she mocked and ridiculed the silent Princess Consort Jing. Princess Consort Jing frowned and said indifferently, Are you done scolding? I advise you to save your energy and have a good rest. We don't know how long we have to stay here. We might have to stay here for the rest of our lives. What you're doing is completely meaningless. Su Shitao's entire body stiffened, and the malicious smile on her face abruptly froze. Impossible! Her shriek almost pierced Princess Consort Zheng's eardrums. Princess Consort Jing knitted her brows in discomfort and shot a glance at the agitated Su Shitao. Do you think your big brother will still come and save you? Princess Consort Zheng's expression was calm as usual, as if she had already seen through everything. That day, I followed the Crown Prince's secret guard back to King Zheng's mansion. After the secret guards broke through the defense line and rushed in, your big brother had already disappeared. Your father and mother have been taken away. Xiao Wei and Mrs. Lin also left. Do you know what this means? Princess Consort Zheng sneered. It's not that I'm an abandoned chess piece. Including you and I, are all abandoned pawns. Su Shitao's body stiffened and trembled. He shook his head and cried out anxiously, "No, that's impossible. 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 I don't believe it. I don't believe it." Su Shitao roared. Even if my big brother gave up on me, my parents wouldn't treat me like this. Princess Consort Zheng looked at her mockingly and smiled coldly at her. Su Shitao, do you still not understand? Your father, your mother, and your elder brother, are the most selfish people in the world. They would disregard their own safety to save you? Just think about it in your dreams. Right now, they can't wait to hide, so how could they possibly show themselves? Princess Consort Zheng harumphed. The Crown Prince has already led people to raid the entire Prince Zheng estate. But did you know? Not a single valuable item in the estate was found. Chapter 5404. What does this mean? Princess Consort Zheng gazed coldly at Su Shitao and said word by word, "It means that they already knew that the Crown Prince would bring people here to clean up, so they packed their bags and prepared to flee. It's just that this list of escapees doesn't include me, much less you. You are merely a pawn in their hands, to be discarded once they're done using you." "Shut up!" Su Shitao yelled angrily, trembling from head to toe. His entire body was trembling uncontrollably. She rushed to the wooden pillars of the neighboring cell and viciously kicked those thick pillars as she raged hysterically, "You're spouting nonsense. You're lying to me, you're lying to me." However, Princess Consort Zheng sat there motionlessly and glanced coldly at her before softly spitting out, "You're so pitiful. Make a detailed inventory of everything and make a list." Dugu Ling leisurely stepped over a patch of withered yellow grass, his gaze landing on a row of servants who were in the midst of taking inventory of goods. On the hillside, there were boxes of supplies. The accountant was holding an account book and leading a few capable servants. They were shuttling back and forth among the supplies, quickly counting the items. Eldest young Sir Qin curiously walked over with young Sir Omega Kotoku and glanced around. "Second brother, I didn't expect that you would be able to gather so many things from a trip to King Zheng's estate." Dugu Ling couldn't help but giggle when he heard this. That King Zheng personally said that he didn't want these things. Rather than benefiting that Prince Amo, why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? Eldest young Sir Qin blinked. "How can you do this?" Dugu Ling turned around and looked at this eldest young Sir like he was looking at an idiot. "Young Sir, many of our underground money houses and shops have been raided and smashed by the Crown Prince and his men recently. Our losses are also very disastrous. These things are merely a drop in the bucket, and we might not be able to make up for everything." The eldest young Sir sighed as he fanned himself. "You should at least leave something for the Crown Princess. This way, if everything is raided, won't she have nothing left?" Dugu Ling's mouth twitched. He simply didn't want to continue speaking with this eldest young Sir. Omega Kotoku said coldly, "Present a gift." "That's true." The eldest young master nodded. "Jojo just gave birth to a child. Logically speaking, as his uncles, we should give him a generous gift." Dugu Ling looked at the sky, speechless. "Brothers, what is the relationship between us?" He fought openly and secretly with the Crown Prince, wreaking havoc and fighting for resources. When it came to the young Crown Princess, everything became a mess. If the patriarch knew about this, he would probably be so angry that he would jump 3 feet high from his stool. "Young master, the inventory is almost done." The bookkeeper stepped forward and respectfully bowed to the young masters. Then he presented an account book. Second young master took it and skimmed through it. Then he took the pen from the accountant's hand and ticked something off on the ledger. Pick it out and sort it out. Send it to the Eastern Palace. The accountant glanced at second young master in bewilderment and said cautiously, His Highness the Crown Prince didn't find anything useful in the King Zheng estate a few days ago. If we send such a generous gift over, wouldn't it be a bit a slap to the Crown Prince's face? Eldest young master waved his fan with a grin and said in unison with Omega Kotoku, precisely a slap to his face. Did this pig-like Crown Prince think that he could raid anywhere? Let him pounce on nothing, let him not raid, let him stomp his feet, let him be angry. Chapter 5405. The Qin Estate's eldest young master and second young master present gifts: 2 bottles of pure jade heavenly dragon pills, 3 bloodwood roots, 1 smoke billowing cloud rope, 1 green feather zither, a pair of heaven winding silk hoops, a pair of mountain snow deer cubs. Mo Lien expressionlessly sat in the main hall as he listened to the servants report each gift. His eyes contained a cold glint as he faintly stared at the long list of gifts that had nearly fallen to the ground. The servant reporting the gifts only felt that His Highness the Crown Prince's gaze was touching. He hurriedly wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead with his sleeve, swallowed, and continued to recite for nearly an hour. Finally, he read, an additional 50 million spirit coin cards. After reporting the gifts, the Eastern Palace servant didn't even dare to raise his head. He knelt on the ground and held the list, not even daring to breathe loudly. Even from such a distance, he could feel His Highness the Crown Prince's displeasure. At this time, if he dared to provoke His Highness, he would most likely die. Sir Jojo leisurely walked in with the baby in his arms. He felt the stifling atmosphere as soon as he stepped into the hall. The little eunuchs and palace maids of the Eastern Palace all hung their heads low and breathed softly, as if they were afraid of angering the man sitting at the head of the table. Jojo's Lotus. Arbor walked up and looked at him in confusion. Why did he look so depressed? Who provoked him? Seeing that he didn't speak, Arbor stuffed the baby in his arms into his hands. Hold the baby. Mo Lien held the baby with one hand and pulled her to sit beside him with the other. With a cold expression, he waved at the servant kneeling below with the gift list. Leave. The servant acted as if he had been pardoned and hurriedly kowtowed to His Highness the Crown Prince. He stood up with the gift list in his hands and bowed before retreating. That person is holding a long list. What is it? It's a gift for Jojo. Arbor blinked and shifted his small body to nudge him. Who's giving Jojo a gift? Mother did mention to me that she wanted to hold a 1-month-old banquet for the child. But it hadn't been held yet, had it? The invitations for the banquet had not been sent out yet. How could there be people coming to the capital to give Jojo a gift? Who was so considerate? Mo Lien's entire body emitted a chilly aura. She said in a low voice, who else could it be? Those 2 brothers. Jojo tilted his head and thought for a while. He frowned and said, Qin de Omega Kotoku? These 2 bastards hid outside Dragonflame City and did not show up, but they were up to no good every other day. Did she think he would be angry about this? Wasn't it just that he was a step slower than them and the items in King Zheng's residence were picked up by those 2 grandsons? As for being so complacent and sending people to deliver gifts, it was probably to slap him in the face. They wanted to tell him, don't be complacent, the contest has just begun. You raided the Qin estate, but we will retaliate. We will empty the entire King Zheng's residence before you do. We will make you angry, make you cry, make you suffer, and make you angry. What a shameless pair. Arbor arched in his arms. Jojo's Lien, you're angry. No, Mo Lien replied stiffly. Arbor rolled his eyes and put a hand on his chin. I'm so angry, is written all over your face. Mo Lien was indeed angry. It had been so many years, but those 2 brothers still did not give up. What? Were they still planning to steal his woman? Jojo would not like the 2 of you. If there was anything, there would have been something already. Chapter 5406. I didn't expect those 2 brothers to be such bad people, but the gifts they've sent time and time again aren't bad. Arbor nodded emotionally as he flipped through the long list of gifts. Mo Lien lowered his eyes, and the corner of his mouth silently twitched. Our three states and their heavenly fate organization are like fire and water. We are irreconcilable, so why do they keep sending me gifts? Arbor put down the gift list and straightened his back to look at Mo Lien, but he called out, Kai Xiao, Kai Chi. Carefully inspect the gifts they send over several times. It's the Crown Princess. The young Crown Princess turned to look at Prince Mo and said with a frown, I wonder if they're up to something. But it's strange. Although they're not very good people, the gifts they send over are quite proper, as if they've never tampered with them. Mo Lien couldn't help but be taken aback. She then asked in exasperation, could it be that you've had people carefully inspect the gifts sent by eldest Qin's Omega Kotoku more than once all these years? Arbor nodded with a solemn expression. Aside from Brother Duan Yu's, the other gifts have to be carefully inspected. How would she know if there was anything fishy in the gifts that those people had given her? Mo Lien, what was going on? Why did Duan Yu seem to be everywhere? This man was so annoying. Jojo. Prince Mo, who was holding a cub, turned his anger into joy and looked at her with a grin. Do you know why they sent you gifts? Arbor nodded solemnly, disdain flashing through his eyes. To make things difficult for me. To make me unhappy, angry, and furious. I won't fall for their tricks. She would just accept the gifts and not think about anything else that would affect her mood. Mo Lien, if those two fools from the Qin estate knew Jojo's answer, they would probably cry themselves to death. It wasn't a matter of a day or two that the little fellow had a super high IQ and a negative EQ. Jojo, actually, Sir Qiao Qiao waved her small hand and hugged Mo Lien's arm as she said, you mustn't fall for their tricks. Those two bad guys gave me those things just to drive a wedge between us. He wants to make us hate each other. You won't fall for it, will you? The little stoic swept a glance at Mo Lien and asked suspiciously. Mo Lien was really speechless. He looked at her for a long time, then pulled her into his arms and lowered his head to take 2 bites. Why are you so annoying? What did he mean by falling into a trap within a trap? He was both amused and angry at the same time. She likes you. After all these years, this guy really didn't feel anything at all. Should he be happy or worried? This little guy was so defenseless. Fortunately, he made the first move. I'm so muddle-headed. I don't even know when I've been tricked. Sir Jojo was enraged and punched him on the head. He shouted angrily, what nonsense are you babbling in front of our son? She was a mother now, so she had to establish a lofty image and prestige in front of her son. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He lowered his head and nibbled on her lips again. Punishing you. Arbor was flustered and exasperated. You want a rebel? Mo Lien only spat out one word when he felt a slight warmth on his knee. Fuck, this little imp was really up to mischief whenever he saw his dad. He lowered his head to look at his son's expressionless face and pinched Jojo's puffy cheeks. Stop fooling around. Your son pooped. Chapter 5407. Eat Dorado. Mo Lien grumbled as he tirelessly changed his son's diaper and washed his little butt. Hubby, it's been hard on you. Jojo stood a little further away and looked sympathetically at Jojo's lotus. She didn't know if it was out of habit, but her son could always defecate smoothly in front of her husband. This was probably a husband's special talent, right? Mo Lien looked back at her and shook her head in amusement. Jojo, you can't even keep that gloating look on your face. Was that so? Arbor raised her hand to touch her little face. Hubby must be tricking her. She clearly had a stoic little face and no expression at all. Jojo, you said before that little furball can enter and leave the star sector freely? Arbor nodded. Yes. But I don't think I've ever seen him go in and out. Arbor was slightly taken aback when she heard this. She thought for a moment and said, although I haven't seen him before, since Chiochio said so, it shouldn't be false. Mo Lien looked at Arbor. Arbor took a few steps forward and looked at the baby who was wrapped in her husband's blanket again. She blinked and said, little furball, if you can go in and out of the star sector, why don't you perform for mommy? With that, The child in front of her disappeared. Arbor wasn't mentally prepared. When she saw her son disappear, her heart tightened and she hurriedly looked into the star sector. On the hillside of Paradise Planet, he saw the baby lying on the ground. Arbor heaved a long sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Little furball, come out." Sure enough, baby Mo appeared in front of the couple and lay obediently on the small round table, as if he had never disappeared in front of them. Arbor had a proud expression on her face as she tugged at Emolien's sleeve and called out softly, "Jojo's lotus, did you see that? Xiaodanzi can understand my words. He can understand. The one in front of you is a baby at the 10th level of the divine realm. Naturally, it is impossible for him to be mentioned in the same breath as an ordinary person." Emolien rubbed the little stoic's head in amusement and said softly, "It's indeed not bad that he can enter and leave the star domain on his own, but this way, we might not be able to keep this little imp locked up in the future. So, you have to make a rope to tie him up as soon as possible." Xiao Mu patted Emolien's back in all seriousness and said in all seriousness, "I'll have to rely on hubby for everything." Emolien was speechless. She lowered her head and rubbed her forehead. "Let's take action tonight. Let's go to the ruined temple in the western suburbs to investigate. Previously, our people stopped at the outskirts of the thatched forest on the eastern peak. It's said that there's a Baihu town up ahead. I wonder how it's doing now." Jojo naturally knew what Emolien was worried about. After all, wherever Heavenly Fate passed, it would be a mess. They had built so many underground bases in the past and devoted themselves to breeding zombies as well as mutated species of demonic cultivators and superhumans. It was hard to say what would happen to that Baihu town. Previously, Yuan Maui said that she would use a drop of blood to feed saplings fragment every 3 days. Arbor's face darkened when she said this. I wonder if sapling's fragment will be contaminated by that woman's dirty blood. She was a bit worried when she thought of this, but Sapling couldn't sense the fragment's exact location right now, so there was nothing she could do. "Let's go check it out tonight." Arbor pinched her son's little paw through the blanket. "Put the children on Paradise Planet and let Sapling play with them for a while. Sleep soundly, catch up on sleep tomorrow." Chapter 5408. At night, after the two of them made arrangements for the children, they quietly left the Eastern Palace and rushed toward East Peak Mountain hand in hand. The two of them used a transportation talisman and arrived near East Peak Mountain in a flash. Looking at East Peak Mountain up close, Arbor couldn't help but be slightly speechless. Duanmu, Little Fatty, and the others ran here every day to undergo the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation. Look, half of the mountain was flattened by the lightning and fire tribulation. Sir Jojo harumphed. "I knew Heavenly Law, that old geezer, wasn't a good person. Look at this mountain. How much force did it use to strike Little Fatty and the others to cause the mountain to be flattened?" Emolien couldn't help but be speechless upon hearing this. Heavenly Law reckoned that it was also quite difficult. After encountering so many people lining up to undergo the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation in succession, it had probably been swamped with work during that time. When Arbor turned around, she saw her husband's small, indescribable expression. The little stoic wrinkled her nose and cast him a glance. "What, could it be that you still feel that Heavenly Law isn't easy?" Emolien quickly shook his large head vigorously and said repeatedly, "How could that be? Heavenly Law, that old geezer, doesn't know what's good for him. What's there to pity? Jojo, hubby will always be on your side." Sir Jojo finally nodded in satisfaction. "Where should we go now?" Emolien was about to speak, but he suddenly grasped Arbor's arm and turned around to cast a chilly glance into the night. A black night bird suddenly flapped its wings and fluttered past them from the treetops beside them. "This place is quite strange." Emolien said softly to his wifey, "I'll hold your hand. Follow me properly and don't run around." Arbor couldn't resist rolling her eyes at him and muttered softly, "I never run around." Emolien couldn't help but laugh when he heard this, and he raised his hand to rub her nose. "Stop bragging. I don't know who it is, but he often runs away in the middle of training." Arbor pursed his lips and thought, "I didn't do it on purpose." Most of the time, it was quite difficult for her as well. Perhaps she would encounter some kind of opportunity out of nowhere. In short, don't leave my side. Mo Lien grabbed her little hand and turned to remind her, we don't know what dangers lie ahead. Don't be rash. Who's impatient? Your whole family is impatient. Sir Qiao Qiao glared at Crown Prince Mo with a huff. The latter smiled at her good-naturedly and held her hand as they walked towards the mountain path of the East Peak. In just a moment, 3 black-clothed men rushed out from the mountain path. The leader cupped his fists and bowed to Prince. Greetings, Your Highness, Crown Princess. Behind him was a man and a woman. The woman's eyes flashed as she followed the man beside her and silently bowed. Arbor glanced at them and found that they were 3 familiar faces. They were the Dou family's eldest young master Dou Fengyan, second young master Dou Fenghua, and third young Miss Dou Fengqi. These 3 people had clearly deliberately waited here for a long time and made a special trip for the 2 of them. Mo Lien frowned and glanced at them indifferently. Were the 2 young masters of the Dou family waiting for us here? The Dou family's eldest young master Dou Fengmian hurriedly stepped forward and bowed again. He said humbly, reporting to Your Highness, there have been strange noises in Mao Lin town recently. Previously, our family had already sent many people to investigate and are more familiar with the path and environment there. We specially waited here and are willing to lead the way for Your Highness, Crown Princess. Chapter 5409. They saw the Crown Prince and his wife looking at them with a slightly hesitant expression. Dou Fengmian hurriedly added, to tell you the truth, the Dou family only discovered it by chance a while ago. His Highness sent people to keep an eye on the ruined temple outside the thatched forest. Since it's a place that even His Highness the Crown Prince is keeping an eye on, it can't be ignored. Dou Fengmian sighed. The family immediately sent people to investigate carefully. They wouldn't have known if they hadn't investigated, but once they did, they were shocked. It turned out that the ruined temple in the thatched forest near Dongfeng Mountain was actually Zhaoguang's old headquarters. The Dou family had always believed that no one lived in that ruined temple. Who knew that it actually hid such a big secret? Dou Fengqi pursed her lips and muttered, Big brother, if we continue talking, those people in the town might really escape first. Right. Dou Fengmian hurriedly nodded. Can you 2 talk as we walk? Prince Mo and Sir Jojo looked at each other and exchanged glances. They nodded and followed the 3 people from the Dou family toward the thatched forest. Our Dou family has been keeping an eye on Maolin Town for more than a month. Now, I feel that this situation is no longer something that our small Dou family can control. Dou Fengmian whispered. On weekdays, we can see the townspeople of Baihu Town going out to hunt or buy things in the morning and afternoon. In the past few days, we haven't seen anyone go in or out at all. The entire town seems to have fallen into a deep sleep, without any signs of life. As they walked, the second young master of the Dou family, Dou Fenghua, explained the strangeness of the situation to the Crown Prince and his wife. The 2 of them looked at each other and clasped their hands tightly together. It seems that the situation really isn't good. Soon, they arrived outside the forest under the guidance of the 3 people from the Dou family. Maolin Town, which consisted of 100 households, appeared deathly still and extremely quiet under the cover of night. You could practically hear the sound of a pin dropping. Arbor held his breath and silently followed beside Mo Lien. After walking for a while, they arrived at the memorial arch at the entrance of the town. The sky was gloomy and dark, as if a thunderstorm was about to descend. Before the first drop of rain fell, Arbor took out a fire thunder umbrella from his inner world and handed it to Mo Lien. Mo Lien was a little amused. While opening the umbrella, his other hand was still holding her little hand. The raindrops fell in a split second, and the speed was a little shocking. The weather had been fine just a moment ago, but now it was as if a hole had been pierced through the sky. Torrential rain poured down on the Dou clan's trio. Even though the 2 young masters of the Dou family had activated their defensive barrier quickly, they were still unable to withstand the frightening rain. Half of their robes were still soaked. Dou Fenghua looked back silently. When she saw the Crown Prince and his wife snuggling together, she couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Who would have thought that the couple who weren't thought too highly of on Seekong planet back then could actually reach this step now? A streak of lightning flashed across the horizon, completely dispersing the darkness in front of him. A ghastly pale old face abruptly appeared in front of third Miss Do. Do Fengqi wasn't mentally prepared at all. When she suddenly saw such a frightening old face appear in front of her, she couldn't help but shriek. She was so frightened that her entire body trembled, and her body slid limply to the ground. Do Fengmian's eyes were sharp and her hands were nimble. She hurriedly reached out to support her younger sister and casually threw a streak of spiritual energy at that ghastly pale old face. Chapter 54:10. In the blink of an eye, more than half of that ghastly pale old face was charred by Do Fengmian's spirit energy. Do Fengqi trembled uncontrollably in fright and scrambled to hide behind her two older brothers. Arbor focused and saw that the two young masters Do were already locked in combat with the old zombie puppet. This old zombie puppet moved like an ordinary cultivator above the 10th level of the spirit realm. Not only was it abnormally fast, but it could also smoothly release the light of spirit energy from its palms. Every time he saw the two young masters Do evade the spirit energy released by the old zombie puppet, Arbor couldn't help but knit his brows. This zombie puppet didn't need to eat or drink and wasn't afraid of pain or injury. Who could endure the two young masters Do's reckless fighting style? It wouldn't take long for the two young masters Do to retreat in defeat. Thus, Arbor looked up at Jojo's lotus. The latter gave him a reassuring look and released a golem with a wave of her hand. This person's appearance was strikingly similar to Lu Yizhi and moved very quickly. It leaped in front of the two young masters Do and intercepted the zombie puppet. Do Fengqi scrambled to roll in front of her two older brothers and cried out anxiously, "Eldest brother, didn't you say that these things are still under control?" Do Fengmian's expression was also very grave at this time, and she turned to whisper to the Crown Prince, "Your Highness, I think we have to speed up and go in to take a look." Our Do family had arranged for many people here before and could basically control the abnormalities within a certain range. But now, why did this thing suddenly run to the village entrance to attack them? Didn't this mean that the Do family members left behind to guard this place might have already been encircled and annihilated by the zombie puppet? The three Do family members were burning with anxiety and hurriedly led the two inside. The golem with Lu Yizhi's appearance was left at the village entrance to continue dealing with the white-haired old zombie puppet. At the same time, a dazzling bolt of lightning glided across the sky above the Ministry of State Security's estate. This madam, unwilling to be left out, was currently lying on the brocade couch with her fragrant shoulders half exposed and her clothes half undone. Only after hearing the low reports from the servants outside the door did she finally smile. "Hurry up and bring her in. It's so cold. Don't let my beauty freeze." Madame Goen gently shook the round fan in her hand and smiled at the servant at the door. The servant answered, "Yes," and pushed the door open shortly after. A gust of cold wind blew in. Even though the madam was very charming, she couldn't help but shiver slightly. A trace of astonishment flashed through his heart. What's going on? Madame Goen thought to herself that she had never felt cold on a winter night before. Even if she was wearing a thin shirt, she was not afraid of the cold. What's going on today? She actually felt a trace of coldness from the depths of her heart. She hurriedly shook her head and suppressed the indescribable uneasiness in her heart. What was there to be afraid of? She had been waiting day and night for this day. Nothing could go wrong. Madame Goen stood up from the couch, and her soft silk sash fell to the ground. Barefooted, her figure graceful and elegant, she walked step by step from the brocade couch to the person who had been carried in through the door. Madame Goen smugly smiled at the unconscious person. "All right, you can all withdraw." She personally took that person and let him lean against her. Looking down, she saw a fair face with tightly shut starry eyes and tightly pursed thin lips. His handsome face was slightly pale, but he still had the bearing of a beauty. Chapter 54:11. Madame Guo's heart was abnormally happy, and she was a little excited. She reached out to stroke the man's fair face, and she muttered to herself, Darling, this time, there's finally no one who's going to disturb us. The servants of the Ministry of National Security didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They silently hung their heads and quietly stayed by the door like statues. However, Madame Gu felt that these people were a bit of an eyesore, so she raised her hand and waved it at the servants on both sides. All of you withdraw. Today was her big day of joy. She had looked forward to it for so long, and finally waited for this day with great difficulty. No one or anything could ruin her excellent mood. Madame Gu carried him in her arms, and she half dragged and half pulled him to the brocade couch to lie down. Her tender and sweet gaze lingered on the man's face, and she couldn't help but raise her hand, about to reach out to stroke him again. But she suddenly saw that the man on the brocade couch suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, that pair of pitch-black eyes were coldly staring at her, as if the person in front of him wasn't her Madame Gu, but merely a loathsome mangy dog. Madame Gu didn't expect him to suddenly wake up, and she suddenly jumped in fright. She couldn't help but be flabbergasted. She reflexively asked, "How did you wake up?" That's right, how did he wake up? Logically speaking, with his frail and ordinary body, after being drugged with this level of incapacitating drug, it was impossible for him to wake up without 3 days and 2 nights. Where exactly did this go wrong? Madame Gu glanced at Fifth Young Master, puzzled. At this moment, the person she placed on the couch and carefully treated like a pearl or a treasure was precisely Ziqin Xiu, one of the Qin estate's 5th dukes. Qin Xiu coldly stared at her, his gaze as if he was looking at a corpse. This kind of gloomy gaze caused Madame Gu's heart to involuntarily jump, and she hurriedly teased, "Darling, why are you looking at me with such a gaze? Do you know how much I miss you in my heart?" "Don't worry, I've already ordered all the servants in the courtyard to leave. Tonight, there's only the 2 of us in this small courtyard." The lady of the National Security Agency threw a coquettish glance at the 5th young master shamelessly. "You can open your arms and be with me at ease." 5th young Master Qin looked at her icily and sneered. "The Ministry of State Security. You're dead meat." He really didn't expect the Ministry of National Security to be so lustful. After the incident at the Qin estate, the Ministry of National Security had been sending people to inquire about him both openly and secretly. She thinks that the Qin estate has already become a stray dog, and the members of the Qin estate are completely powerless to resist, right? Therefore, he, a pitiful person with no cultivation base and no ability at all, was bound to become the property of the National Security Bureau, and could be tortured by her as she wished? Darling, Madame Goen didn't know that she was about to die. She called her with a smile and directly took off the 5th young master's outer shirt. "Darling, the night of spring is short. Let's not waste any more time. You're so disgusting." The 5th young master suddenly flung her hand away. Caught off guard, Goen was flung out and slammed into the opposite door frame. Clang! A loud sound rang out. As expected, the small courtyard was very quiet. Just as Goen said, she had chased out all the servants in her courtyard because they were a hindrance. Now, there was no one by Goen's side, and there was only her and Qin Xiu in the courtyard. Seeing that Qin Xiu's handsome face was still very seductive in anger, Goen swallowed her saliva. Chapter 54:12. She had yearned for the men of the Qin estate for a very, very long time. The 5th young master was elegant and simple, and Goen had always been unable to forget him. Today, she had obtained him by chance with great difficulty and had long forgotten her parents' names. She was currently looking at the person in front of her in a daze, not even anticipating the impending danger. Until an enormous force lifted her up and heavily smashed her onto the table, then she fiercely tumbled to the ground. Madame Goen finally came back to her senses in astonishment and hastily tried to crawl up from the ground. But unexpectedly, a staff heavily smashed into the back of her head. This hit stupefied Madame Goen. She also raised her head in confusion, only wanting to glance at that 5th young master. A pear wood staff had appeared in this 5th young master's hand at some unknown time, and he suddenly smashed it down. Even a level 12 great spiritual master like Madame Goen was smashed into a daze. Clutching her head full of blood, Madame Goen couldn't help but cry out, "What are you doing?" Qin Xiu looked at her expressionlessly and suddenly reached out to grab her by the throat, his handsome face covered in a malicious expression. It was truly traveling far and wide in search of something, only to find it without any effort. He had wanted to kill this bitch for a very long time. Now that she had delivered herself to his doorstep, how could he not make a move? On the other side, Madame Goen felt her throat tighten as she stared incredulously at the man in front of her. She opened her mouth, but was unable to spit out a word. How was this possible? When they met at the banquet a while ago, this fifth young master was still an ordinary person without any cultivation. But now, how could he suddenly clamp down on her? What was even more laughable was that she, a grand level 12 great spiritual master, actually couldn't break free from the hands of this ordinary person. This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Madame Goen did her best to inhale and exhale as she stammered, "You, let go, have something to discuss. Who would have thought that fifth young Master Qin would actually smile at her? That extremely cold expression actually had a near-fatal attraction, causing Madame Goen's struggling movements to involuntarily stifle. "Do you think I'm still that pitiful little thing from before that you can do as you please to me?" Qin Xiu's fingers tightly clutched Madame Goen's neck as he sneered, "You no longer exist." That lowly, pitiful, cowardly coward of her already completely no longer existed. Soon this matter would be resolved. All the humiliation and unbearable humiliation that this slut had brought upon him would eventually become a thing of the past. "Goen, you will die in a different way. It will definitely be unforgettable." "No, you can't kill me. I am Glory City's City Lord's adopted daughter. I am the current empress." Madame Guo's voice suddenly stopped and she suddenly let out a miserable howl. The fifth young master had actually used an extremely cruel method to create this pair of hands. Goen was in so much pain that he couldn't stop trembling. He was on the verge of collapse. But then she heard that devilish voice ring in her ear. "Didn't you want to play with me? This is only the first step. Dong 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 dong, dong 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 dong." What happened? The old woman who was on night duty walked over from the drooping flower gate. She rubbed her eyes as she walked and glared at the young eunuch who was pounding on the garden gate in displeasure. "What time is it now? Can't you wait until dawn to report? Nanny Li, hurry up. Hurry and inform Her Majesty the Empress. Just say that something has happened to Madame Goen." The young eunuch who came to report couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 54:13. The main reason was that Madame Guo's dead face could be said to be terrible. Not to mention that there was no piece of good flesh on her body, the whole body was almost torn into pieces, and it was difficult to sew and mend them. The little eunuch vomited again and again at a glance, and he dared not close his eyes tonight. He was afraid that as soon as he closed his eyes, he would recall the horrible picture. Recently, Madame Guo came to the Empress every 2 or 3 days to chat with her, as if they were sisters. Although the Empress had always been very indifferent to Madame Guo, she had never hated her for the sake of the old city lord of Glory City. Every time Madame Guo came to talk about something, the Empress entertained her very well. Those who could work in the imperial palace were all sophisticated people, and they all saw it and remembered it in their hearts. They knew that although Madame Guo was not liked by the little crown princess, she still had some face in front of the Empress. When Mammy Li heard that Madame Guo had an accident, she did not dare to neglect. She quickly took a token from the little eunuch and hurriedly turned to leave. It was raining heavily. Mammy Li walked quickly to the door of the bedroom with a sullen face. At this time, the movement outside the door had alarmed several nannies on night duty. Mammy Li quickly reported it to the supervisor nanny, who thought for a moment and said, "It's still early, and His Majesty hasn't got up yet. I'm afraid it's inconvenient to disturb him rashly. How about this? When it's a little bright and His Majesty gets up to go to the court, we'll go in and report it to the Empress." Mammy Li nodded repeatedly and deliberated with several nannies. Finally, she said to the supervisor nanny, "It's all up to you. His Majesty disliked it most that someone disturbed Her Majesty's rest. Even the matter of Madame Guo was certainly not an important matter in His Majesty's view, and he could not disturb the Empress at will. Several nannies stopped outside the hall and waited for the sound of rustling to come from the bedroom when it was a little bright. Then the supervisor nanny took the lead and knelt outside the hall to ask for an audience. Soon, the small door of the partition in the bedroom was opened from the inside. The head palace maid, Pearl, stood at the door with an indifferent expression and asked, "What is it?" Signaled by the supervisor Mammy Lee hurriedly crawled forward a few steps and respectfully handed over a waist token. Replying to Miss Shinju, "There is a piece of news from outside the palace. Madame Goen was killed in her residence for no reason. The steward of Madame Goen's residence specially sent someone to report this to Your Highness." Jinju's eyes flickered slightly. She glanced at Mammy Lee and said, "Come in with me." Mammy Lee bowed her head and followed Jinju into the bedroom in fear and trepidation. She carefully followed her step by step. Just as he stepped into the hall, he stole a glance at the indistinct figure behind the curtain. She then heard a cold and low voice. "It's so early in the morning. Why did you disturb the Empress?" Mammy Lee was so scared that her face turned pale. She quickly knelt on the ground and stammered, I deserve to die. There is a reason for this. There is a news outside the palace." Bai Wuxia helplessly pulled the man's clothes and said, "Why are you yelling at her? Go to work. Don't you have to go to court early today?" After that, he said softly to Mammy Lee, who was kneeling outside the curtain and didn't dare to raise her head, "You don't have to panic. Just make it clear." Mammy Lee was relieved and replied in a low voice. Chapter 54:14. Reporting to Nyang, the sky has yet to brighten today. The steward of Madame Goen's mansion hurriedly sent the news to the palace. Madame was killed in her home late last night. No one knows why she died. The steward was very vague and didn't make it clear. The emperor took back his leg and looked at Mammy Lee, who was kneeling on the ground, in astonishment. He waved his hand, and a black shadow drifted in front of him. "Your Majesty! Go and see where the little bastard and his wife are now." Bai Wuxia helplessly twitched the corner of her mouth and glared at her husband with resentment. This guy said it in front of all the servants. Was his son shameless? The emperor touched his nose, rolled up his sleeves, and sat down beside the empress. He told Jinju, "Serve the meal. I'll accompany Wuxia to eat before leaving." Jinju responded with a smile and quickly left to serve the breakfast. Mammy Lee knelt there with cold hands and feet. She didn't dare to raise her head, and her heart was beating fast. The empress's gentle voice came to her ears, "Mammy, get up. Don't panic. Go and bring the person who sent the message here. This consort wants to ask him a few questions." Mammy Lee breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. When she stood up, she found that her legs and feet were a little weak. Mammy Lee quickly stabilized her body, bowed, and pushed out the door. Soon, the little eunuch who delivered the message was brought to the emperor and the empress. At that time, the two had just had breakfast. Bai Wuxia whispered to the emperor to hurry up and do the business. However, the man had to stay here and wait for the secret guard to bring the news back. The empress felt a little helpless, but she couldn't say anything in front of outsiders. She just glanced at him secretly. The little eunuch trembled as he repeated what he knew. This servant deserves to die. This servant went to the Ministry of National Security to take a look at Madame. Her tragic state was shocking. This servant did not dare to take another look. The empress nodded and comforted him in a warm voice. "This is human nature. I just want to know the reason. I don't mean to blame you. You don't have to panic. Get up." The little eunuch was flattered and nodded repeatedly. He quickly stood up with a trembling body. The empress instructed the chief palace maid, Pearl, to take out some spirit coins to reward the little eunuch, and then ordered someone to send him out. A moment later, a hidden guard who had gone out to investigate the situation flashed into the bedchamber through a side door. He bowed and greeted, "Your Majesty, Nyang." The great emperor glanced at him. "Pumpkin, tell me about the situation." The shadow guard said in a low voice. This subordinate went to take a look at Madame Goen's mansion. Indeed, as the news said, Madame Gowen's death was quite tragic. All the skin on his body is broken, as if he had been sliced into pieces. Are the little brat and his wife in the Eastern Palace now? The Empress reached out and patted the Emperor. She pursed her lips in displeasure. How can you suspect your son and daughter-in-law? The Emperor thought. With the little stoic daughter-in-law's methods, this isn't necessarily impossible. Madame Gowen had offended the little stoic several times in the past. It was very likely that they didn't deal with her previously because their daughter-in-law didn't have the time to deal with her. Now that the baby was born and everything was fine, they might think of her when they were free. Shadowguard Pumpkin glanced at the great Emperor with an odd expression. He then respectfully replied, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince left the city in the middle of the night yesterday with the Crown Princess and headed to East Peak Mountain in the western suburbs. They haven't returned to the palace yet. What? The great Emperor and the Empress were shocked. Nonsense. The great Emperor cursed gloomily. Chapter 54:15. Why are these two brats so worrisome? The Crown Prince, this brat, was too deceitful. How could he not understand his wife's situation after giving birth not long ago? Why did he bring his wife out of the palace for a stroll at East Peak Mountain? What good could happen if they sneaked off to East Peak Mountain in the middle of the night? When did they leave? Bai Wuxia hastily questioned. Late at night. This subordinate speculates that it was around the same time as Madame Gowen was killed. Gowen's estate was in the east and west of the western suburbs, which meant that the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess couldn't have attacked Gowen. These two brats were busy with other matters last night and simply didn't have time to care about Gowen. That was strange. Then who exactly did the National Security Agency die for? According to the Hidden Guard's description, it seemed that she had a deep-seated hatred for the person who killed Gowen. The Empress and the Emperor looked at each other and saw a trace of graveness in each other's eyes. An unknown person infiltrated Gowen's estate and killed Gowen. There was something fishy about this matter. Your Majesty, please go to court first. I'll go to Gowen's estate to see what's going on, Bai Wuxia said softly. At the same time, thousands of corpse puppets surrounded a residential house in Maolin Town. Bang, bang, bang. They smashed the transparent defensive shield on the outside and let out roars one after another. This residence originally belonged to the mayor's family. Currently, the residence's main hall was packed with people. Other than Emolien, Arbor, and the three young masters and young misses of the Dou family, the old mayor of Maolin Town was leading more than 100 townspeople to block the entrance with weapons in hand. They were afraid that those things outside would break in so that they could resist them in time. Emolien beckoned to the old mayor. No need to be so nervous. Perhaps they were affected by the Crown Prince and Crown Princess's calm mood, but the originally tense crowd felt a bit better. The old mayor said shakily, This commoner and the others truly deserve to die. We didn't expect to cause His Highness and Her Highness the Crown Princess to fall into such danger. No need to worry. The little stoic Crown Princess comforted him. She had reinforced the outside with dozens of defensive needle techniques. Within 6 hours, those things would not be able to break through the door. Besides, it wouldn't be difficult to bring these people away safely. They just wanted to clarify some things first. The old mayor continued in tears. Most of the townspeople in our town listened to Zhao Guang's nonsense and joined in. If it weren't for the two great masters of the Dou clan coming to remind us, we would still be in the dark. Dou Fengmian said with a cold face, Tian Yun is really abominable. He used bright light to attract some innocent people into the organization and used them as test subjects for all kinds of drugs. I pity these innocent townspeople. Dou Fenghua sighed. By the time the Dou family found out, it was already too late. Most of the townspeople had already consumed Zhao Guang's improved medicine, becoming neither human nor ghost and beginning to mutate. The old mayor wiped his tears and said, The rest of us only dare to hide in the cellar during the day and sneak out at night. I want to escape, but I have no way to do so. Fortunately, the young masters of the Dou clan came and sent many people to help us. But this evening, for some reason, those corpse puppets suddenly became violent. During the resistance, the Do clan sacrificed many people. There were also some corpse puppets that escaped from inside the town. I don't know if they have already left the town. Mo Lien nodded and summoned a shadow guard to instruct him in a low voice. Go to bed early tomorrow night. Chapter 54:16. Could it be that there's something outside the town that's attracting them? Do Fengmian said in a low voice. Do Fenghuan nodded thoughtfully. That's very possible. After all, why would the zombies that had always been obediently wandering around the town suddenly become irritable and start a massacre this evening? There had to be a reason for this strange occurrence, but they didn't know for the time being. Arbor glanced at the sallow and emaciated old mayor, then his gaze swept over the 100 or so townspeople behind him. These miserable Maolin Town townspeople had been miserably deceived by the organization Bright Light. They originally thought that if they joined Bright Light, they wouldn't have to fear being bitten by zombies for the rest of their lives. Who knew that this organization itself was an organization of swindlers? They tricked them into joining Bright Light in order to use their families and friends as experimental subjects. Looking at their current dejected appearance like stray dogs, Arbor didn't need to think to know that many of their relatives and friends must have mutated into zombies. The old mayor of Maolin Town suddenly knelt in front of Arbor and Mo Lien with a plop and said in a tearful voice, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess. Please help us, the townspeople. He truly regretted his past actions now. If he had known that Bright Light was so vicious, he would have given these townspeople a warning even if he had to sacrifice his life. Those pitiful young children were transformed into corpse puppets, and they didn't even have the chance to refuse. This was all his fault. He hadn't dissuaded them and pulled them out of that fiery pit. Arbor signaled to the side with his eyes. Immediately, a hidden guard walked forward and single-handedly lifted up the sobbing old mayor from the ground. He shouted in a low voice, Stand properly. The old man was so frightened that his legs went weak, and he stood there stiffly. Don't worry, old man, Mo Lien said faintly. We came here this time to eradicate this malignant tumor, Bright Light. The rumbling outside suddenly grew louder. It sounded like thousands of zombies were attacking a part of the defensive barrier with all their might. It was as if they were trying their best to break the defensive barrier in front of them within a few minutes. Yuba walked in, bowing to Mo Lien Arbor with a strange expression. Crown Princess, Your Highness. The corpse puppets are organized in a well-trained manner and are launching a fierce attack on the defensive barrier in the south. If this continues, I'm afraid the defensive formation will be completely destroyed in less than half an incense stick's worth of time. The old mayor and others were so scared that their faces turned pale. They couldn't stop trembling. Could it be that they were about to clash with their friends and family? Over the past few days, they had watched their relatives and friends turn into zombies, walking corpses one by one. They felt extremely uncomfortable in their hearts. Now they had to kill their own relatives and friends with their own hands. How could they accept this? Arbor glanced at them and asked, Would you like to stay in the storage talisman for a while? The old mayor and the others nodded repeatedly. Instead of letting them watch their relatives and friends die one by one in front of him, he was powerless to save them. It was better not to see, not to hear, not to think. Most of the townspeople were very willing to hide in the storage talisman. Seeing this, Arbor put the old mayor and the townspeople into the storage talisman. Something came up at the last minute. Tomorrow afternoon, around 4 o'clock. Chapter 54:17. The shouts and roars from outside traveled into everyone's ears. Sir Jojo and Prince Mo met each other's eyes. Mo Lien grasped her small hand and asked with a wink, Wifey, are we going to charge out and fight? The little stoic glanced at him and silently gave him a look that said, You're a fool. Prince Mo was taken aback. He then glanced at his wifey's small face and inexplicably didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What was going on? Wifey was looking at him like he was an idiot. Right Arbor was expressionless. His small hand darted out of his sleeve and abruptly released little Fatty and the others from the star domain. We came out to stretch our limbs. The little stoic coughed lightly and said with a serious expression, "In reality, it wasn't a good idea to be cooped up in the star domain all day long. If they cultivated there every day, they would become stupid from holding it in. So when she said that she let them out to fight or something, they should find it very interesting if they thought about it from other people's perspective. Besides, what kind of joke was this? Sir Jojo wasn't a fool like her husband. How could he foolishly walk out and allow so many zombies to besiege him? A group of people in the star domain would grow moldy if they had nothing better to do. It was simply great to come out and fight." As expected, when Qi Xianxian and the others heard this, their spirits were instantly roused. Fighting and stretching their limbs were what they liked the most. On the other hand, the Dou family's third Miss, Dou Fengqi, who was standing on the side, couldn't help but flash her eyes. She whispered sourly, "The crown princess is truly extravagant. She packed so many helpers in her portable spatial spirit tool." The Dou family's eldest young master, Dou Fengmian, knitted his brows and glared warningly at Dou Fengqi. This third sister had always been a fussy person. Back on Seekong planet, she had clashed with the little crown princess several times. Fortunately, she was just a little girl's jealousy, so it wasn't a big deal. Moreover, as she grew older, third sister's temper had slightly curbed. Eldest young Master Dou warned her because he didn't want third sister to make a mistake again. She didn't want third sister to listen to that strange muttering. Today's crown princess is not someone she, a little girl from the Dou family, can make up nonsense at will. Presumably, Dou Fengqi also knew that she had said the wrong thing. As soon as she finished speaking, she tightly shut her mouth. On the other side, Qi Xianxian and the others were released by Arbor. As soon as Mata left the star field, he could not help but rub his fists together. He said with a smile, "Jojo, have you dealt with those outside?" Arbor nodded. "They've all turned into zombies. Hurry up and put on your armor." All right. Everyone took out a complete set of protective armor from their inner worlds and equipped themselves from head to toe. Qi Xianxian wielded her purple light treasured sword while Ko Hongwen carried his double-headed hammer. The couple stood at the very front and grinned. "Let's go. Clean up those outside." Arbor thought for a moment and could not help but frown slightly. He paused and said, "Pay attention to your own defenses. If you can capture them alive, keep a few to test the reaction of the antidote." However, he didn't know if the second stage of the antidote developed by Huang He and the others would have any major effect on these people who had completely transformed into zombies. After all, strictly speaking, they were already considered dead. The second stage of the antidote developed by Huang He was only effective on some injured living bodies. "Don't worry, Jojo." Qi Xianxian raised her small hand wrapped in armor and waved at Arbor. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.